Part 98. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 1010. But in just 5 minutes, all the red eyes were extinguished, and with a burst of footsteps, the clown walked out of the darkness. Soap and Noir noticed that although the smell of blood in the air was so strong that it could make people he vomited, but the clown's body was very clean, not even a speck of blood stained on him. Just, what was that? Soap asked immediately. It seems to be a mutated rat living in the pipeline, the clown said. This kind of thing is very common in this place. Mutated rats living in the pipes, Soap repeated these words. In other words, the monsters in the underground labyrinth in those folk stories are real. Existence, the clown nodded. Part of the maze is connected to the experimental side of the institute. Occasionally, experimental creatures that have escaped from the restraints will enter the maze. Although the undead crew members have the ability to control the Ark, they can find these at any time. Escaped creatures and killed them. But perhaps for observation purposes, they did not do this. The purpose of observation, Soap's cheek twitched twice. What do you mean? This underground labyrinth itself can be regarded as a huge testing ground, and it is a high-quality testing ground that can simulate lack of food, harsh environment, complex terrain, and ecosystem. Put these creatures inside, survive the fittest, and let them survive on their own. Evolutionary mutation is much more efficient than in an ecological box with an artificial environment, the clown said. In addition, the protective partitions in the areas adjacent to the main reactor and the maze have been secretly removed. Under the influence, the radiation concentration in those areas will remain at a very high level. Creatures that can survive in that environment will have stronger vitality, and will also have mutations that cannot be observed in the laboratory. In the biology laboratory of the Institute, the research team often irradiates experimental organisms with radiation lamps or feeds them feed mixed with radioactive substances to induce mutations in these experimental organisms. However, this experimental method is very inefficient. So much so that later on, researchers often released large numbers of experimental organisms directly into high radiation areas in the wilderness. The mission that 33 once performed in the Prismatic Basin was one such experiment. But most people would never have imagined that the Institute and the undead crew would go so crazy that they directly ignored the safety of the residents of the Ark and transformed the underground labyrinth sandwiched within the Ark's structural layer into a large-scale mutation testing ground. That is to say, we will encounter more monsters next. Soap bit his back teeth hard, stood up with his hands on the ground, and directed his tactics deep into the pipe. The ground and the walls of the pipe were stained with a lot of blood that had not yet dried, but not a single corpse of the mutated rats that the clown was talking about was seen. Eh? Where are the corpses of those monsters? Are they not dead? They ran away again. Soap raised the muzzle of his gun vigilantly and pointed it at the depths of the pipe. They have become nutrients, the clown whispered. Although these rats cannot provide soul-level supplies compared to humans, their flesh and blood have enough energy to make up for the consumption along the way. Supply at the soul level. Noir raised his head and looked at the clown. Can you tell us what this means? Actually, the 4 soldiers I killed were not dead, the clown said. Absorbing their flesh and blood is only secondary. My main purpose is to absorb their souls. Soul? Are you kidding? Soap narrowed his eyes. Do people really have that kind of thing? To be honest, I don't believe it. Even if I have seen so many strange and chaotic things, I don't believe there is anything in this world. There is such a thing as a soul. This is too superstitious. When a person dies, he is dead. There is no difference between body and soul. Soul is just an adjective that I found as appropriate as possible in the human vocabulary. You can also understand it as thinking, consciousness, but after thinking about it, I still feel that the word soul is the closest to it. Meaning, the clown said. Aren't thoughts and consciousness electric currents generated in the human brain? Noir said immediately. Logically speaking, after brain death, all human thoughts and consciousness will dissipate immediately. Even if there is such a thing as a soul, there is no relationship between the soul and the body. It cannot be separated. The body is the carrier of the soul, and the soul without the carrier cannot exist independently. Thousands of years of human research, there are still many mysteries in the brain field that have not been solved. The clown seemed to become very patient and explained in detail. If you have ever met someone who survived that experimental project, you will find that the power of human thoughts can actually be materialized and embodied. If the power of thoughts is strong to a certain extent, it can even be said to be all your wishes come true. Of course, in my understanding, it can. Truly, that's probably the only one who can make all your wishes come true. What are you talking about? Why can't I understand it at all? Swoop interjected. Don't discuss things like soul and body. I only care about one thing. You said those 4 soldiers are not dead. Isn't this pure nonsense? I watched them die before my eyes. Their souls, or in other words, consciousness, have merged with me, the clown said. You can think that it is the intelligence dealer nicknamed the clown who is talking to you now, or you can think that it is the common intelligence of the 5 of us. Consciousness is communicating with you. It's just that in this common consciousness, the original clown occupies the dominant position. After listening to the clown's explanation, although Soap was still a little confused, he still had a chilling feeling. Absorbing other people's souls and merging into one body sounded like something done by demons in fairy tales. Why are you doing this? Can you give us a reason? Noir asked again. I suspect that you took us two with you because you plan to use us as backup nourishment. I guessed it right. Bar. I will indeed do that if I have to, the clown said truthfully, but at least not now. What's the use of absorbing souls? Absorbing flesh and blood can at least allow your body to gain energy. What about souls? What's the use of this kind of thing to you? I have been eroded, irreversibly eroded, the clown said slowly. His voice was low and hoarse, like a rough rope net dragging on the decaying wooden deck. Both Noir and Soap felt an inexplicable feeling. Chill. This kind of erosion will be reflected on both the physical body and the soul level. Physical erosion is mutation, and I will become the monster you call me, but physical erosion will not be fatal in a short period of time, or even it will give me great power, as you can see. The clown paused for a moment and continued, the most troublesome thing is the erosion of the soul. It will gradually change my perception and make me forget that I am a human being. It will transform my thinking into a period of time without self-awareness program. This program will control me to perform those things that should be done, and in the final stage of erosion, my soul will gradually be assimilated by him, abandoning this weak body, and blending with him. Both Soap and Noir held their breath, waiting for the Joker to continue. If you compare this degree of erosion to a progress bar, when the progress bar reaches the end, I will lose myself, completely abandon my humanity, and become a monster in the true sense, the clown said, including Zeus. Those people, their souls have fallen. Although on the surface they seem to still have reason, what drives them is no longer their original will. They want to sacrifice all human civilization on the ark to that existence, so it led to this disaster. I wanted to stop them, but I was too late. I could only place my hope on another person. As for myself, I could only remedy the situation as much as possible. But my erosion level is also in danger. In order to delay time, I have to absorb the souls of those 4 people. But, Noir said softly, interrupting the clown, you just said that this erosion is irreversible. Since it is irreversible, how can we delay it? If erosion is compared to a progress bar, I really can't push back the progress, but I can extend the length of the entire progress bar, absorb and fuse those souls with low erosion levels or even those that have not been eroded before. It can increase the overall quality of the soul. Judging from the current situation, I should still have 3 days left to wake up. After 3 days, if the problem is not solved or new means of delay are found, you will eat us, right? Noir tried his best to suppress the fear in his heart and asked in as calm a voice as possible. The clown didn't answer, just nodded silently. What will happen if we fail? Everyone will die, or, perhaps, become his food, the clown murmured. Our bodies will work for him until the last moment, until the oil runs out, and our souls will be wiped out of themselves. Consciousness, traveling through countless dimensions, is drawn to him and becomes one with him. Noir, so, in fact, your eating of humans is no different from him, except that his appetite is much larger. If you understand it this way, that's right. The clown suddenly let out a self-deprecating chuckle. After all, I was modeled after him. It's just that the difference between human civilization and that existence during the period, the gap is so big that it cannot be described in words. Well, to be honest, the rhetoric you just said always feels very familiar to me, Zhao Yao said. It's the one where consciousness and soul are integrated into one. I have participated in many combat operations to exterminate heretical sects. Those lunatics. I have also come into contact with many, and there seems to be such a thing in their teachings. Pious people sacrifice their bodies and souls to the great God, and they can merge with the great God and obtain eternal life. From this point of view, the people who confuse these believers should be, as you said, corroders who have lost their own will, right? Almost, the clown said. The prophet of the heretic sect should be considered the closest individual to that existence among human beings, except for another person. But the more truths you know, the higher the level of power you are exposed to, the more you recognize knowledge becomes more easily distorted. Do you know that prophet? Noir asked. I heard that he was killed by the field army during the battle at the ruins of the ancient bronze city. I have known him for a long time. He was once a person who regarded the survival of human civilization as the highest goal, but it didn't take long for him to fall into madness. He killed half of the people who were guarding him and sent the other half to him. The man was transformed into something like a puppet. He escaped from the holding facility we arranged for him and hid in the residential area of Ark. That should be easy to detect, right? Noir wondered. At the time when the prophet appeared, the resident identity registration system on the Ark was already very complete. He didn't even have a legal identity, even if he was hiding in a slum. Should be able to be found, right? Someone within the immortal crew has also suffered corruption, perhaps Zeus, or perhaps others. With their secret help, the prophet's whereabouts were erased, and thousands of security agency agents searched in various areas of the Ark. For 6 months, there was no harvest. During this period, the organization that we later called the heretical sect gradually grew. You should all know what happened next. After the Battle of the ancient Copper City ruins, a lot of information about the heretical sect was lifted, including the report of the prophet manipulating a batch of corrosion seeds to raid the Security Bureau stronghold and then successfully escape from the Ark. In fact, with the control ability of the Ark at that time, it was completely possible to strangle the prophet inside the Ark, even if the number of erosion seeds he controlled doubled, even if the Security Bureau and the Guards Corps did not have the ability to active ammunition at that time, to restrain the seeds of corrosion. Heavy firepower and human sea tactics alone could kill the prophet and those seeds of corrosion, but in the end they still let him go. Before that, I already knew that there were traitors in the undead crew, and there was more than one, the clown said. Have you ever been a member of that undead crew association? Soap couldn't help but ask. In other words, the ones General Maginot refers to, the big shots who can be contacted using the black card. So be it, the clown nodded. For some reasons, I had to leave that organization, but I left behind a plan that basically has no loopholes. As long as the Undead Crew Union does not completely fall apart, this planet will continue to be implemented. What's the plan? Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 1011. A plan that has continued from Alpha civilization to the present day. The clown said this, and suddenly paused. He looked at Soap and Nouvel, and found that their eyes were full of doubts and curiosity. He shook his head and said, I can't let me tell you more details, cognition is pollution. This plan involves too many dangerous things. If I reveal this information to you, there is a high chance that you will be eroded, and eventually become like Logo monsters like Ni. Of course, if you strongly demand to know the truth, I will respect your choice, but you must be prepared to bear the corresponding price. Neville and Soap looked at each other, but neither of them continued to ask further questions. The clown continued, although this kind of erosion is irreversible, it will not be very obvious in the early stage. By the time the body shows mutation symptoms, it can already be regarded as the late stage. Even if all the memories are erased at that time, it will not be very obvious. There is nothing that can be done to prevent the symptoms from worsening. Speaking of which, I actually retain a certain degree of selfishness. I hope that the degree of erosion between you two will always be kept at a low level. People with low erosion levels are considered high-quality supplies for you, right? Noir asked calmly. Being absorbed by you can delay more time. I'm right. Bar. That's right, the clown didn't deny it. After all, you still want to eat us. Soap complained in a low voice. At the end of the day, we still have to die. Damn, I knew it. Noir was not as frustrated as Soap. He continued to ask, I still have a question. Why did Ronnie develop to the late stage so quickly after coming into contact with the survivor? This erosion speed depends on the person. Is it different? It varies from person to person, but the level of corrosion in Ronnie's body is already close to the dangerous level. There is no risk of exposure to the survivor, and the cognitive contamination is also very slight, so you are basically not affected. But it became the straw that broke the camel's back. The clown sighed in a very rare way, and said with some regret, Ronnie's career is destined to expose her to a large number of dangerous sources of erosion. Previously, the heretical sect attacked the Mukake base, and a large number of soldiers were infected by the corrosive seed. Those twisted limbs and the seemingly meaningless murmurs before death could actually affect the people around them. Over time, the erosion of these medical personnel will reach a very dangerous level. Will you be infected by this level of contact? Noir's face became very ugly. Then if General Maginot really wants to gather troops and start a war with these things occupying the Ark, then during the battle, the soldiers participating in the war will inevitably be corroded, right? There's no way around it, the Joker said. Then we are bound to lose this war, Zhao shouted. Since you have known all this for a long time, why don't you tell General Maginot directly? This war, we still need to fight. It's not that we have no chance of winning, it's just that the winning chip is not in Maginot's hands. Fortress Mukake, General Maginot's office. After Kaylan finished speaking the last word, Maginot dared to carefully exhale a breath. He stretched out his hand towards the coffee cup on the table, but his fingers kept trembling and he couldn't exert any strength to pinch the ear of the coffee cup. After trying several times to no avail, Maginot retracted his hand, stood up with his elbows on the armrests of his seat, walked to the window with some trembling, and looked at the busy soldiers on the playground in the distance. Go. His back at this time looked as if he had aged 30 years in an instant, from a prosperous middle-aged man to a swollen and fat old man in the blink of an eye. After a while, he walked back to the chair, sat down slumped, and asked, Can you guarantee that everything you said is true? It's absolutely true, Kaylan replied. I don't have to lie to you about this kind of thing. Then what I'm doing now is meaningless. Even if we can take back the Ark and get rid of those who have been eroded, we will also lose this new home that we finally found. What awaits us is like a bereaved dog. Endless drifting in the universe. The ultimate fate of human civilization is either to perish on its own in the interstellar drift, or to be captured by one of those gods and become an insignificant nutrient for them. Maginot opened the drawer of his desk, looked at the exquisitely crafted pistol lying inside, and laughed self-deprecatingly. To be honest, I really want to hit my temple right now. Gun, so that I would be completely free. The funny thing is, I couldn't even muster the courage to commit suicide. Damn fat man, You are a general after all. Do you make me feel like a waste? Hound stepped forward and slapped the table hard, causing the mixing spoon next to the coffee cup to jump up and hit it. There was a crisp sound on the plate. What do you mean? Everything we do is meaningless, compared to us. The situation of the Alpha people is truly desperate. At least, we still have a chance to escape, right? Where can we escape? Maginot stared at the Hound and asked. According to what Kaylan said, our final destiny is just to hand over the baton to the hands of human civilization in another time and space. Everything we do now effort seems to me like the death struggle of a group of insects. There is one thing I must correct, Kaylan said. We don't even have the ability to hand over the baton to the hands of human civilization in another time and space. If we give up here, then the Alpha civilization and the one who once helped them unknown human civilizations that have broken through the technical difficulties of refusion, as well as other human civilizations that we are not aware of but have passed on the baton, these beliefs and legacies that have been passed down as a unit of civilization have been completely cut off by us. Lost. Damn fatty, it's actually not difficult to understand. According to what you said, a person only lives a few decades. After death, everything has nothing to do with you, so what's the meaning of life? Hound's tone softened slightly. He said a little more, although I am not married and have no children, but every time I see the children of my old subordinates, I feel like I am seeing my own children. They represent the future and hope of mankind. Between me and so after retiring, I became a relic hunter, working hard to make money, just to give them better education and living conditions. Speaking from a young age, I feel that the wishes that my parents and I have not been able to achieve in this life can be realized by them. To put it bluntly, they are the continuation of the fire of human civilization. When we die and our bodies are thrown into the incinerator and burned to ashes, they become us, passed down from generation to generation, to continue to do what we have done, to do things we wanted to do but couldn't do, and even things we couldn't even imagine doing. The Hound licked his dry lips, drank the coffee at hand, and continued, to be honest, I don't like to tell others big truths, and I hate others telling me the truth the most, but if you insist on asking me what the meaning of civilization is and what the meaning of life is, then I can only tell you that this is the meaning. Maginot raised his head, looked at the Hound with some disbelief, and murmured, Nick, do you really think so? He had always hated other people, especially the Hound who called him by his real name. This time, he unexpectedly did not resist. He nodded very solemnly and said, even if we can only be dispensable in this long relay, it's a blow, but at least we have to do better than Alpha civilization, otherwise, it would be too embarrassing. Maginot took a deep breath, then exhaled it forcefully, and turned to look at Kaylan. I understand, then, what should we do next? Continue to gather troops, Kaylan replied. Your original plan is fine, but our main goal is not to recapture the Ark, but to eliminate those who have been severely eroded. Their existence will prematurely exposing our civilization to that existence may even trigger a new round of disaster. Once all human beings are branded, we will have no chance at all. What about after taking back the Ark and clearing out the corroders? Maginot asked. Gather supplies and survivors, open up a new home in the folded space inside Yagonactor, and at the same time collect and digest as much of the legacy left by the Alpha civilization on this planet. Wait until we put these legacy after digestion is almost complete, we can escape from Alpha planet on Yagonactor. This should take a long time. Digesting the legacy left by the Alpha civilization is probably not something that can be completed in one generation. Maginot frowned. Since Ark discovered the Alpha planet in 840 of the New Era, countless human scientists have devoted themselves to this undertaking. It has been more than 100 years now. However, during these hundreds of years, this part of the heritage digested by humans only accounts for a very small amount. Small proportion. Let's not talk about the things and technologies that are still buried deep in various ruins and have not been unearthed. Just talking about the technologies that have been discovered by ruin hunters, less than 1/10 of them can be applied. Moreover, it is just an application, not a complete analysis. There are many principles of alpha civilization technology that Arc civilization cannot understand, such as energy crystals and nano-alloys that can be seen everywhere. These two things have been completely integrated into the daily life of Arc civilization. Among them, but to this day, the technical black box existing in it has still not been opened. As long as the alpha language can be deciphered, this process can be greatly accelerated, Kaylan said. In my plan, this process takes about 300 to 400 years. For an individual human being, this is a period of time. It's a long time, but not a long time for civilization as a whole. Do we really have 300 to 400 years left? Maginot asked. As long as the corroders can be completely eliminated and the disaster does not break out again during this period of time, I think the time left for us will be much longer than 300 to 400 years, Kaylan said in a positive tone. For that being, a primary civilization like human civilization has as many stars as its control area. It is impossible for him to pay attention to every weak civilization that is going to perish or transforming into a dependent tribe. If he wants to let the probability of his eyes landing on the same planet repeatedly is extremely slim. Even if there is, the interval is probably extremely long, so long that even the word eternal cannot be used to describe it. Maginot once saw a statement called crater theory in military textbooks. It means that when veterans are attacked by enemy artillery fire on the battlefield and cannot find reliable bunkers, they often choose to lie down in the first few rounds of shelling in the crater left behind. Because the probability of 2 shells landing at the same point is very low, and the crater can help soldiers avoid flying metal fragments and shock waves, so in this case, the bomb crater becomes the battlefield, the safest place. This Earth, or in other words, Alpha Planet, is such a crater. Yagoniketer, the first block of the ecological zone. Leighton and Yvonne left the infirmary. They walked around the base several times, and finally entered here through the teleportation channel at Leighton's suggestion. So, the development of this first block is pretty good, right? Standing in front of the outpost, Leighton said to Yvonne as if to show off, after you go to the grey mist forest, the people we left behind will step up the development of this area. First drive the indigenous creatures here to the edge, use walls and deep ditches to isolate them from our activity area, and then carry out large-scale construction and build various bases and strongholds. Said to be honest, it feels like the Ark just landed on Alpha Planet a few decades ago, and people built a network of transit stations step by step in the wilderness. You talk as if you have experienced that era. Yvonne rolled his eyes at Leighton and complained, in that era, you were not even born yet. Ah, I was not born, but there are many documentaries describing that era, and there are many real video materials. Tisk, let's not talk about it for now. Can I take you in to take a look? Okay, Yvonne nodded. The two walked into the gate of the base, and the first thing they saw was a vast area of farmland. After identification by agricultural experts, the soil here is not only capable of growing plants on the earth, but is also very fertile in nutrients. At that time, I was still a little confused as to why the Alpha people would leave such a place. Now that I think about it, it should be that they specialize in it's ready for us. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 1012. The new home prepared for us. Yvonne squatted down, picked up a handful of soft and fertile soil, and sighed in a low voice. To be honest, until now, I still have a very strong feeling. Unreality. Who isn't? I always thought that if there were alphas still living on this planet, a war with us humans would be inevitable, so I always regarded them as enemies, but I never would have imagined that the alpha people are actually humans from another time and space. Leighton said. The exploration team found several deep wells filled with this kind of soil in the first block. According to calculations, the total reserve is about 400. About 10,000 cubic meters. If they were dug out, spread flat on the ground, and planted with food, not to mention the 30,000 people on Yagunactor. Even if this number increased 10 or 20 times, we can also feed. Soil, is this the soil of the original Earth? Ivan rubbed the rough particles with his fingertips and murmured. As humans born in the new era, they have not really come into contact with the soil from the Earth. Although there are many soil cultivation farms on the Ark specifically used to produce high-end crops, in fact, the soil used in these farms is just this artificially prepared solid culture medium is essentially the same as the liquid culture media in hydroponic farms, except for its different appearance and slight differences in nutrients and various added elements. To put it nicely, this is called high-end customization, which highlights a taste and style and reflects the wealth, ability, and taste level of consumers. To put it harshly, it is an IQ tax. Kaylan once suspected that it was the Japanese people who came up with the idea of retaining these indigenous farms. After all, in the old era, they were the best at doing this kind of thing. Just bring in any old craftsman to be a craftsman or master, even the title of immortal can be given casually. With the blessing of this cultural atmosphere, Japanese food has simply become a sharp knife for consumerism to cut leeks, a bowl of plain white rice, add a story at will, come up with some XX immortal who has been immersed in this way for decades, and put a limited label on it. You can buy it for several times or even dozens of times the price. The money is not very easy to make. After the hunting god hunting group became famous and everyone started to have money, Hound once specially bought a bag of rice produced by the so-called topsoil cultivation farm. After comparing it with the ordinary rice produced by the hydroponic farm, everyone found that there was no difference between the two. Only after knowing that the bowl of rice in front of them comes from Tupi farm will the experimenter be driven by psychological effects to feel that the bowl of rice seems to be whiter and more fragrant, and the taste is softer and waxier. As for the real earth soil, it can be regarded as almost the top luxury product on the Ark. The price of this thing is more expensive than diamonds of the same weight. The largest jewelry brand on the Ark once launched a series of luxury jewelry with the theme of homeland. The main body of these jewelry is an artificial gemstone with a cavity inside. In this cavity, several pieces of jewelry are poured into it. Milligrams of earth's oil. Although Kaylan had no money at that time, the jewelry company posted this gimmicky product advertisement in every conspicuous place on the internet, so that someone like him had no idea about jewelry and luxury goods. Anyone who doesn't care knows that the pendant containing 0.25 grams of earth's oil was sold for a sky-high price of 470 million credits. If only someone could be so luxurious as to use real earth's oil to grow food. After the Ark landed on Alpha Planet, it's not like no one has thought about the surface soil of Alpha Planet, but from an agricultural perspective, the quality of the soil on Alpha Planet's surface is extremely poor, whether it is pH, content of various beneficial or harmful elements, or judging from the degree of radiation, the soil here is not suitable for growing food crops. If you want to grow food on Alpha Planet, there are only two ways to go. One is to improve the genes of Earth's crops so that they can adapt to the harsh soil environment and climate environment of Alpha Planet. The other is to build a closed greenhouse and then filter and purify Alpha Planet. The soil of the star is adjusted to a level suitable for crops through various means. Researchers at the agricultural branch of the former institute have been working hard, but to no avail. As for the latter, the soil suitable for planting produced in this way is actually no different from synthetic solid culture media. On the contrary, the cost of purifying 1 cubic meter of alpha soil is enough to synthesize hundreds of cubic meters of solid culture media. The technology of hydroponic farms has become very mature, and there has been no large-scale food crisis on the Ark since landing on Alpha Star. Under the influence of multiple factors, the Alpha Star Reclamation Plan, which was originally a high priority, has been continuously pushed forward. Later, until it was completely forgotten. Of course, at that time, There were also scholars who went astray and focused on the indigenous crops of planet Alpha. These plants have evolved over tens of thousands of years and have become very suitable for the environment of planet Alpha, eliminating the need to modify crops on Earth. The complicated steps of genes, but after countless experiments, they unfortunately found that there were very few crops on Alpha Planet that could be eaten by humans, and most of them had slow growth cycles and pitifully little yields, making them not suitable as main crops at all. Rations. The only thing that is close to the selection criteria is the gray potato, the staple food of the exiles in the wilderness. This crop only takes 2 to 3 months from planting to harvesting, which is similar to potatoes on the earth. Its tubers also contain a lot of starch and can provide enough calories to the eater, but the problem lies in the neurotoxins that are difficult to remove no matter how they are processed, as well as the heavy metal elements and radiation pollution that are concentrated inside the potatoes due to the growing environment. The main reason for the high incidence of radiation sickness among the exiles, in addition to their frequent entry into high radiation areas, is the long-term consumption of gray potatoes. Planet Alpha is not suitable for the development of agriculture at all. This is a truth that has been unanimously recognized by the academic community. But both Yvonne and Leighton knew that this planet was not called Alpha, it had the same name as their hometown, called Earth. It's not like a synthetic solid culture medium, Leighton said to Yvonne. Either the Alpha civilization's technology is strong enough to create soil that is just like the real thing, or this is what was preserved before the Earth was contaminated. Natural soil. To be honest, I prefer the latter. Yvonne picked up a small piece of gravel, brought it to the tip of his nose and sniffed it vigorously. He closed his eyes and looked relaxed, as if he smelled a good smell. To be honest, when we first discovered these soils, that boy Yayan had bad ideas, Leighton recalled with a smile. That boy said that compared with the Earth soil, this soil can be easily mistaken for the real thing. All we need to do is add the first block, all information about the block, to the outside world, and then secretly take a little soil and put it on the ark, and you can make a lot of money. He really said that. Yvonne was stunned. However, even if some wealthy people who are not well informed will be deceived, over time, the total amount of Earth soil circulating in the circle will change. If you get more and more, someone will definitely notice the problem. Even if these soils are exactly the same as the Earth soil, the reason why the Earth soil can be sold at a sky-high price is because of its rarity. Now that this rare attribute has disappeared, the price of the Earth soil will plummet, and its luxury status will disappear. But what does this have to do with us? Anyway, the money has already entered our pockets, and as for the cost we paid, it can be ignored. A voice continued Ivan's words. The two of them turned around and found Yayan, wearing a pair of overalls, standing not far away with a bunch of books in his hand. It's full of technologically advanced farm tools. Did you really take the soil here and sell it on the ark? Ivan's mouth twitched unnaturally. Although it was harmless, for some reason, his heart was filled with the desire to complain. It's a pity that he really doesn't know where to start spitting out this groove. It almost caused him internal injuries. Not much. In 3 months, a total of 12 times, I sold 140 grams of soil. Yayan reached out and picked up a piece of hardened soil from the hoe, about that much. Just measure it, and successfully withdraw a huge amount of money. By the time those people came to their senses, I had already cancelled the company that was registered with a fake identity by an entrusted professional, and all traces had been wiped out. No one was there. It can be traced to my head. Even if they find some clues and know that these soils are related to Yagunactor, they do not have enough evidence to prosecute. After all, even if they identify them 100 times and 1,000 times, those soils, the composition and texture are the same as the only Earth soil left on the ark. Good guy, how come I don't know about this? Leighton exclaimed. I feel like I missed 100 million, no, a lot of hundreds of millions. Both Miss Soma and Uncle Hound knew that part of the profits gained from selling the soil were shared between the Soma Consortium and the Hunting God Hunting Group. It's just that Uncle Hound said you have a big mouth and will let the matter out, so he asked me to hide it. Yours Yan replied honestly. Damn it, you bastard, old dog, is making a fortune behind my back. This money, even if it's just a fraction of me, is enough for me to iterate all the equipment on my body a dozen times, Layton said depressedly. Said. Isn't your cybernetic body already the latest model? And they are all top-of-the-line models. How do you want to iterate? Yvonne asked in confusion. Don't you understand this? The so-called latest model and top-of-the-line are only relative to mass-produced products. As for the road to customization, it is never-ending. As long as the resources are in place, it can always be keep upgrading. I understand, it's a never-ending, bottomless pit of money, right? Yvonne nodded. Then can you beat Kaylan? Oh, let's not talk about Kaylan, he is too perverted. Let me pick one for you. An opponent with a weak point. Let me ask you, after your cyborg prosthetic body has been modified to the greatest extent, can you defeat Akira Asano? Of course, we can't beat him. Layton paused for a moment. How can Asano Akira be considered weak? He is also a monster level. With human technology, it is impossible to win against him under the same conditions. Unless you let me build a battleship main gun level plasma cannon and blast it in his face, even if the cyborg body is modified to the extreme, even if the technology of the Alpha civilization is added, I am afraid that it will be useless in front of his knife. It's just like being cut into pieces. If you are still struggling with that money, then I can tell you that this money has disappeared from this world, Yan said. When we were identified as rebels, all of our private accounts, they have all been frozen. No, they should have been written off, and the numbers that symbolize wealth have all returned to zero. Yan's tone has always been calm, and there is no trace of sadness or joy on his face. He seems to be a different person from when Layton and the others first met him. Hey, let's not talk about this anymore. Let's change the topic. Layton waved his hand. Speaking of which, as for Muka, things should be almost done by now, right? P.S. Regarding the ending of Alien Ruins Hunter, I have something to say to you at the end of the chapter. I have actually written the ending of this book, but I have difficulty transitioning the plot to the ending. According to the plot of a Hollywood blockbuster, there should be a vigorous, decisive battle at the end, with both sides risking their fortunes in a battle of life and death, and if you want to take a different approach, there will be more choices. The first method is more secure, but to be honest, it is a bit old-fashioned. As for other plot directions, it may be a risky attempt. So I am still struggling. I have revised the detailed outline of the second half of the final chapter several times, but I have never come up with a plan that satisfies me enough. My last book, Wasteland Survival Code, was actually unfinished. It was because of the 404 factor that many of the pits dug in the early stage could not be filled. Even so, the whole book was removed from the shelves for a period of time. Secondly, it was the first time I wrote a novel of more than 2 million words. In the overall plot context, there are still many deficiencies in the control, which caused many places to break down. There are also certain logical problems, so we can only end it hastily. During this period, I have been thinking about how to write the ending of this book all day long. It can also be said that I am in a state of serious stalling, so the chapters in the past few days are a bit watery and the reading will seem a bit slow. Today's chapter is mostly about farming. Please be a little tolerant. Speaking of which, I am actually quite interested in farming-related articles. One of the several plans for the next new book is about farming. I wonder if you would like to read farming articles, and what comments and suggestions do you have, whether it is about farming or not, the ending of this book or a new book. You can leave a message in the chapter description of this chapter. I will read it one by one and reply seriously. PPS. Thank you for the 500 starting coins rewarded by La La La. Thank you Xingyu Jengui. 100 starting coins for 3,700 rewards. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chenmi San. Chapter 1013. Just as Leighton, Yvonne, and Yayan were chatting about farming-related matters, their communication devices all rang in unison. They looked at each other and took out their cell phone. "It's a message from Kaylan," Yvonne said. "The negotiation was successful. Hey, why are the files attached to the email so big? It seems like a lot of pictures." Leighton muttered as he clicked on the pictures. The next second, he was petrified on the spot. Yvonne and Yayan performed slightly better than him, but their expressions also changed dramatically, and it took a while for them to recover. "The one in the photo is the Ark, right?" Yayan murmured. "Probably," Leighton nodded. "It seems that we are in big trouble this time. A big war is inevitable." According to the content of the message, General Maginot of Muka Fortress is gathering troops to counter-attack Ark. According to the agreement between Kaylan and General Maginot, Yaguna Kotar also will participate in this battle, Yvonne read while looking at the screen. "The good news is that at least we don't have to fight alone, but the bad news is that the situation inside the Ark is probably worse than we imagined." Yayan nodded and said, "Fortunately, I have already taken care of the remaining clan members before this. They are all connected to Yagunakter, so there is no need to worry when the war begins. This is nothing but good news. With Muka a small number of troops, even if several other military bases on Alpha are added, the total combat power is only a fraction of Yagunakter. If I were to choose, I would rather not have these friendly forces than turn the Ark into this," Leighton complained. "Things have already happened. It's useless for you to say this. You'd better think about how to fight this battle." Yvonne patted Leighton's arm. "No matter what, if you can get tens of thousands more friendly troops, it will be a good thing. Although combat power is important, it is never the only factor that determines the outcome of a war." Mukake Fortress. General Maginot handed the tablet in his hand to Kaylan and said, "We have contacted 4 fortresses, 29 military bases, and 677 transit stations, except for the Siberian fortress in the far northern tundra. At this time, we are resisting the attack of tundra creatures, and all other troops are gathering towards Muka. This is the approximate number of troops." Kaylan glanced at the statistical table on the screen. Most of the troops dispatched from these fortresses and military bases were motorized light infantry, with mechanized armored troops accounting for less than 1/10 of the number. There is really no way around this. These troops are basically garrison troops in various fortresses and bases. Even when faced with attacks by indigenous creatures, they rely on fortifications and the equipment attached to them to fight. There are heavy weapons, but it is difficult to dismantle and take away. If you want to assemble the troops in such a short period of time, you can only go out lightly. Another reason is that most of the armored units of the Field Corps have been damaged in the battle at the ruins of the ancient Bronze City. After the war, Ark's focus was on repairing the damage to the hull, and it did not immediately replenish equipment and soldiers for these troops. After all, the enemy that threatened Ark the most, the heretic sect, had been completely destroyed in this battle, and the Field Corps the only things that need to be faced are the indigenous creatures wandering in the wilderness. There is no longer that urgent need to replenish military strength, so these things have been put on hold and have been postponed until now. As you can see, although the total number of troops can always be 200,000, this is already a waste of all bases, logistics personnel, non-military personnel, in short, all that can be obtained. The figures obtained after all those who had weapons were mobilized urgently. The actual combat effectiveness must be at least halved. What's more, we don't have reliable fire support, and we have to fight a tough battle." Maginot sighed continuously. "I know this battle is difficult to fight, but now that the exact data has come out, I have discovered that it is not a matter of whether it is easy to fight, it is simply impossible to fight. If you hadn't appeared, I would have chosen to give up now. This is thanks to the Emergency Compulsory Mobilization Act enacted by Ark. Otherwise, let alone 200,000 people, we might not even be able to raise 50,000 people," Hound said while sitting on the armrest of the sofa, crossing his legs. "I want to know one thing." Major General Alexander put his arms on his knees and crossed his fingers, with a worried look on his face. "It is right for each base to initiate emergency mobilization, but do those who have been mobilized know the current situation in the Ark? I am very worried that if we wait until the troops are assembled before announcing the truth, the morale of the troops will be greatly disturbed." The Emergency Mobilization Act was formulated when Ark landed on Alpha Star. The content is also very simple. When an extremely urgent situation occurs, the commander of each military base has the authority to mobilize everyone in the base. This owner includes the troops stationed at the base, friendly forces passing by temporarily, and even consortium convoys, engineering troops, exploration teams, mercenaries and relic hunters that temporarily use the base as a foothold. At the same time, in addition to combat troops, logistics personnel, ranging from the commander's secretaries and orderlies to gang leaders and employees in outsourced commercial facilities, must be deployed. As for this very urgent situation, it is up to the commanders of each base to make their own judgment. After the incident, ARC's Joint Parliamentary Group will conduct a second evaluation of the entire incident. If unnecessary losses are caused by the commander's misjudgment, the Joint Parliamentary Group will hold all relevant personnel accountable and provide high compensation to the losing party. However, if it is found that the situation at the time complies with the Mobilization Act, but someone disobeys the order, the disobedient will be punished as a deserter, regardless of whether the person is a soldier or not. The judgment criteria for this secondary evaluation are very strict, so generally the commanders of various bases will not easily initiate emergency mobilization. In fact, even if such emergency mobilization is initiated, there are only a handful of situations in history that can change the situation. If you think about it, you will know that the situation is so critical that non-combatants are required to go to the battlefield. How can these people who rarely touch guns on weekdays use their strength to turn the tide of the war? This kind of thing can only be discussed after the troops are assembled. Maginot rubbed his forehead and said with a depressed look, "We have no way out and can only make a desperate move, but the biggest problem now is it's not about people, it's about equipment." According to the statistics in the table, the total number of vehicles of each army is more than 18,000, of which more than 80% are unarmed off-road vehicles and transport trucks, with light weapons such as dormitory cannons and rocket launcher nests. There are less than 2,000 armored vehicles with thick armor and strong firepower. There are only more than 50 heavy tanks that can be used as the main force for battlefield advancement. The number of artillery and aircraft is even more worrisome. With a force of 200,000, the intensity of heavy fire support is not even as strong as that of a division during the Battle of the Ancient Bronze City ruins. The number of powered exoskeletons is only a little over 30,000, there are more than 800 light mechas, and there are slightly more heavy mechas than tanks, but they have not reached 3 digits. What's even worse is, we don't have any empty ships, not even one Maginot side. In the wars of this era, airships play a very important role. A large airship is like a highly mobile air base that can undertake a series of tasks such as fire strikes, cover support, and logistical supplies. Without airships, the supporting ground troops will be reduced by more than 70% in terms of strength. And the importance of a fleet is self-evident. "General, actually, we have an empty ship." Levi stepped forward and said to Maginot with some hesitation. "We have an empty ship? Why didn't I know?" Maginot was stunned for a moment and asked. "Isn't the number 4 shipyard of the Air Force fleet next to Fortress Griffin? As far as I know, a Orca-class heavy cruiser has entered the final stage a month ago. It is expected to be completed after the fleet acceptance is completed by the end of the year. It will be delivered for use. Even if it is not completely finished now, it should be close to 10. With a little rush, I think we can have the warship flying into the sky before the battle begins. As for detailed inspection and debugging, I'm afraid it's just there's no time. There is actually a Orca class that is almost completed." When you said that, I remembered that some time ago, there was a convoy transporting shipbuilding materials, and they borrowed the passage from us. Machi General Nyo fell into thinking, the combat power of a heavy cruiser is enough to tilt the balance of victory or defeat, even just a little bit, but the problem is, we don't have anyone to drive it. The engineers, technicians, and workers in the shipyard can build warships and understand the principles of how warships operate, but if they are asked to drive warships in battle, it will definitely not work. Being able to build and use warships are completely different things. People without professional training, even if they know the functions and operation methods of various equipment on the battleship, may not be able to put them to use in battle. The systematic tactical instructions and operating specifications of the battleship cannot be achieved in a short time. Before the officers and soldiers of the Air Force fleet officially board the ship, they need to stay in the simulation training ship at the airport for half a year before they are qualified to touch the real thing. As for the selection of captain, it is even more strict to the extreme. Originally, this Orca-class heavy cruiser was to be delivered to the 1st Cruise Fleet. The 1st Cruise Fleet would draw a group of experienced veterans from each ship and board it with about 1/3 of the cruisers who had just come out of the training ship. New recruits form the crew of this battleship, and they continue to work together in the process of bringing the old with the new until everyone is extremely familiar with this battleship. But now, the 1st Cruise Fleet has all fallen on the surface of the arc. As for the simulation training ships built in the airport, I am afraid there will be no living people inside. There was a battleship, but no one was driving it. This made Maginot feel distressed. "No, someone is driving," the Hound suddenly laughed. "Damn fat man, are you suffering from Alzheimer's disease? Have you forgotten who this is?" Maginot raised his head and followed the sight of the Hound to look at Major General Alexander sitting opposite the sofa. When he thought of the other person's identity, he straightened his body and said happily, "How could I forget this? Major General Alexander and you guys together, the survivors of Fleet Zero should also be on Yagonactor, right? I just don't know how many survivors of Fleet Zero there are. As far as I know, operating such a heavy cruiser, there are also equipment such as carrier-based aircraft, which require at least 400 to 500 people. There are nearly 30,000 surviving officers and soldiers of Fleet Zero," Major General Alexander said, "excluding the wounded and some who have lost their will to fight. The number of people who can participate in the battle is about 10,000. We can also manage 10 such heavy cruisers. It can be driven. In addition, I hope to personally serve as the captain of this Orca-class ship." "The fleet commander personally serves as the captain? Isn't this too dangerous?" Maginot blurted out subconsciously. "Is there any danger? Before I served as the commander of the Zero Fleet, I was the captain of a U-class heavy cruiser in the 1st Cruise Fleet. If the Zero Fleet had not been formed, maybe this ship the Orcus will be deployed under my command. Besides, I am no longer the commander of Fleet Zero. The battleship is the battlefield I am most familiar with. You let me hide inside Yagonactor. Looking at my former subordinates charging into battle, I couldn't do it," Major General Alexander said solemnly, every word ringing loudly. "General, you are so brave." Maginot immediately clapped his hands and praised, "I admire soldiers like you who are so strong. If I hadn't been old and inconvenient to move, I would have wanted to go to the front line to command the battle." Before Maginot finished speaking, he was mercilessly interrupted by the Hound. "I'm about the same age as you, how can I have the nerve to say that I'm older? If you're afraid of death, just say it. It's not embarrassing. I'm afraid to death, but there are some things more terrifying than death, but the fact that you have difficulty moving is quite real. If you ask me, you should really lose weight. With your big belly now, I'm afraid you can't even lower your head when you go to the toilet. Can't you see any of the stuff? Nick, your mouth is still so annoying." Maginot looked at the Hound with some helplessness. "To be honest, when something happened to you, the brothers wanted to protect you, but the attitude of the people above, we are very determined, we can only win the result that you will not be in the army, If you didn't have such a bad mouth and said more nice things to the people above you, you might still be in the army now. Humph, what's such a pity? People above, you mean the United Council group? Aren't they just a group of puppets controlled by the undead crew? Let me flatter them, forget it. And, stay here, that's not necessarily a good thing in the army. You might end up being sold as cannon fodder at some point. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 1014. Noah's Ark, inside the mezzanine structure, underground labyrinth. After passing through a total of 46 passages that were constantly changing positions, Clown, Soap, and Noir finally stopped. You can rest here temporarily for 20 minutes. There will be no changes in this area within 20 minutes, the Clown said. The three of them basically never stopped along the way, and battles with mutant creatures living in the underground labyrinth also broke out from time to time. Even if the Clown could help the two recover their physical strength, the mental fatigue could not be eliminated. The two from the beginning, I eagerly asked the Clown about various things, to the point where I am too lazy to say a word to the monster no matter how abstract it is. Only 3 hours have passed. Soap numbly filled the empty magazine with bullets one after another, while Noir silently took out an energy bar, tore open the aluminum foil package, chewed and looked around. This place was different from the previous one. The passage is completely different. It is a room with multiple layers of partitions. The wall is entirely made of metal, with yellow and black warning stripes and a trefoil-shaped radiation hazard sign printed on the edge of the entrance. Soap took out the straw of the water bag, took a few sips of water, and then asked, "Where is this place?" The early maintenance of ARC's reactors and power furnaces relied on manpower. "This is a place for maintenance personnel to store equipment," the Clown replied, but later, fully automatic robots that are not afraid of radiation replaced human maintenance, and the robots only need one machine. A charging pile was enough in the library, and this place was abandoned. Later, during several major module renovations, this place was separated separately, sunk into the structural layer, and became part of the underground labyrinth. The Clown walked to a wall with an obvious gap, grabbed the raised handle on the wall and pulled hard, and a cabinet hidden inside the wall was pulled out. This is an equipment cabinet. Most of the grids are empty. There are only a few grids with worn-out old-fashioned protective clothing. A single piece of this type of protective clothing weighs more than 100 kilograms and cannot be put on or taken off by one person. The radiation protection ability can only be said to be barely adequate. As early as the interstellar drifting era, this type of protective clothing has been eliminated. No wonder all these equipment were abandoned here and no one went to recycle them. We need to bypass a main reactor on the road ahead. The radiation concentration in the surrounding area will be very high. You'd better put on protective clothing, the Clown said. Soap and Noir walked to the equipment cabinet and gestured in front of the hanging protective clothing. These protective clothing are all adjustable in size, and there is no problem of inappropriate sizes, but the rusty metal, there is a question mark as to whether components and seriously aged fabrics still have radiation protection capabilities. "This thing looks very heavy," Soap muttered, picking up the sleeve of a protective suit and weighing it. "The mobility is not very good. It is difficult to walk with this thing on, let alone open it. The gun and the fight, the fingers of this protective glove can't even fit into the trigger guard." "You don't need to fight. If you encounter mutant creatures, I will deal with them," the Clown said. "Okay, I know you are very strong, but to be honest, the most dangerous factor along the way is not the mutant creatures, but the damn underground maze itself," Soap said. Like the previous situation where they relied on ziplines to move, they encountered it more than once. Several times, Soap and Noir lost their feet and fell into the abyss. Thanks to the Clown's timely action, he used his tentacles to fish them back, so that neither of them ended up falling to death. Fate. If you put on these heavy protective suits, let alone move like parkour, you can't even jump, unless the road behind is as flat as the ground. otherwise putting on this thing is the same as stuffing yourself into. There is no difference in a soft coffin. Noir did not speak, but walked to the other end of the room, unscrewed the valve of the airtight door, and pushed open a small gap that could only fit a finger through. The next second, he felt an obvious stinging sensation on his soapy skin, and Noir immediately closed the door. He glanced down at the screen of the multifunction watch, shook his head at the soap, and said, "The radiation intensity has greatly exceeded the danger threshold. According to calculations, if you enter this environment, it only takes 15 to 30 minutes to be fatal. Even taking anti-radiation drugs is useless." "Is the radiation from ARC's main reactor so strong?" Soap was stunned for a moment. "In my impression, these reactors..." Before he finished speaking, he suddenly slapped his thigh. "Damn it, I forgot about that group of lunatics. In order to promote the mutation of these monsters in the underground labyrinth, they removed all the protective barriers. Damn it, this is equivalent to directly exposing part of the underground labyrinth to a strong radiation area." Noir looked at the clown and asked, "What is the depth of the radiation zone? Is it possible to get around it?" "It can't be bypassed. If we go around, we need to plan a new route. As for the depth of the radiation zone, it is about 1 kilometer, but the road is not very easy to walk at the speed we were traveling at just now. It would take half an hour to get through." "Time," the clown said. "Half an hour?" Noir calculated. "Even if you take anti-radiation drugs, you won't be able to last this long. Even if you don't die, it will induce acute radiation sickness, but if you wear these protective suits, you won't be able to walk this way. Past. Okay, now, we don't even have a chance to go back home now." Haha. Soap shrugged and laughed self-deprecatingly. "The passage we just walked through has been disrupted and scattered. The only one who remembers the rules of the underground maze is the clown, and he only remembers the change rules of this road within this specified period of time. From the beginning, this is a road of no return." "Joker, there is one thing I want to confirm with you again," Noir said. "You say?" "Although the two of us are not important in your plan, as a drug that can slow down your erosion, it is definitely better to live than to die, right?" Noir said. "At least, we are useful to you, otherwise, you wouldn't have saved us so many times." "Yes." "Then if I need you to take the two of us out of the radiation zone, can you do it?" Noir asked again. "Two people together, plus protective clothing and equipment, weigh almost 1 ton. The clown thought for a moment before nodding. "It should be possible, but I can't guarantee that when encountering a stronger monster, we can still ensure your safety." "It doesn't matter, as long as you can move us. If you encounter a powerful monster, you can throw us aside. We will find a way to protect ourselves." "Can." After receiving the clown's assurance, Soap and Noir each chose a protective suit of decent quality and put it on. The design of this protective suit was similar to the space suit of the old era. The only difference was that there is no jetpack that allows astronauts to move in a zero-gravity environment, nor is there a powered exoskeleton built into the outboard suit. This protective suit, weighing more than 100 kilograms, completely requires the wearer's own strength to hold it up and drive it to walk in a gravity environment. This is undoubtedly a very stupid design. "This thing should be used with a powered exoskeleton," Soap complained to Noir while putting it on. "Look at the lining of the protective suit. There are fixed locks reserved for connecting to the exoskeleton, but here there are only protective suits and no exoskeleton. Powered exoskeletons are much more valuable than these old-fashioned protective suits." "They must have been taken away by others," Noir said. "Also, even if they leave you a complete set of exoskeletons, after so many years, the motor has long since aged to the point of being useless." "That's right, damn it, it's a pity that my exoskeleton was overloaded and burned out when I was escaping, otherwise, I wouldn't be in such a mess now." The two helped each other, and it took them 10 minutes to put on the protective clothing. After checking the seal for the last time, Noir moved step by step to the airtight door and pushed the door open again. Two tentacles as thick as arms extended silently from under the clown's cloak and wrapped around Noir and Soap's bodies. The two suddenly felt their bodies lighten up, and their walking became much easier. I will try my best to preserve your maximum ability to move independently while reducing your burden. If you want to be more relaxed, I can connect the tentacles to your spine and directly read your nerve signals. In this way, these two tentacles can be turned into a powered exoskeleton controlled by your nerve signals, and you can use it to make various movements. No, let's avoid it. Soap waved his hands repeatedly, although I am not so disgusted with these things growing on your body. If you want them to enter my body, then I will never accept it, unless I die. You can do whatever you want with my body then, and I have no objection to eating it all. But not now, absolutely not. Well, that's it, that's good, Noir said. Letting the tentacles enter the body will cause us to be corroded, right? Just like the 4 soldiers who were eaten by you. No, corrosion will not spread through direct contact, the clown said, but since you are unwilling, I won't force it. Connected by the 2 tentacles, the 3 people passed through the airtight door back and forth like Siamese people. Behind the airtight door is a plank road spiraling downwards surrounding a huge cylinder. One side of the plank road, one side is directly welded to the cylinder, and the other side is a cliff without any guardrails. In addition, the width of the plank road is less than 2 meters, just walking on it will make people's hearts beat faster. To be honest, I really don't like this kind of terrain. Soap wanted to reach out to touch the gun hanging on his back, but found that the range of movement of the arm of this protective suit did not support such a large movement at all. He had already rotated my joints to the limit, but still couldn't reach the backpack behind me. The backpacks on this kind of protective clothing are all for companions. Noir helped Soap take off the gun and handed it to him. Soap took the gun and awkwardly pulled the bolt to load it, in order to solve the problem that the fingers of the protective gloves could not pass through the trigger guard. He had just sawed off the trigger guard. Although it was easy to misfire, at least he fired. No need to take off your gloves when doing it. These gloves are screwed to the cuffs, and it would take several minutes to take them off alone. Soap held the grip with one hand and placed the other hand across his chest. He placed the handguard on his forearm and aimed the muzzle of the gun diagonally upward. At the position where he aimed, there was a huge moth attached to the cylinder. The surface of the body is motionless. I don't know if this moth is dead or alive, Soap said softly. If it is alive, then we are very lucky to bump into such a big guy as soon as we go out. The wings of this moth are in a folded state, but the length of the body is already more than 20 meters. If calculated according to the proportion of ordinary moths, its wingspan is estimated to be more than 50 meters after unfolding, even among the indigenous people. The creature's body shape is obviously several times larger than that of Earth's creatures, so it can be regarded as a giant creature. Although this underground space is wide, the various steel structure support columns, constantly moving passages, and various pipes extending from the ground almost completely fill this space. Such a huge moth wants to be like this. How can it ensure that it does not hit those pillars and pipes when flying in such places? On the folded wings of the moth, there are intimidating patterns that resemble eyes, but in Soap's view, the size of this guy alone is enough to be intimidating, and the existence of this pattern is simply superfluous. It should be alive, right? Noir murmured. If it's a corpse, the wings shouldn't be so brightly colored, right? It looks like a processed specimen, but, if it's alive, why does it not react at all when we shine a tactical flashlight on it? As for moths, no matter what kind they should be creatures that are very sensitive to light, right? It's dormant. Try not to disturb it, the clown reminded. I know it. It has been attached to this waste pipe and has not moved for at least 30 years. This waste pipe is used to store reactors. Nuclear waste, it relies on absorbing the radiation escaping from it. Can it survive just by absorbing radiation? Then it doesn't need to eat, Soap asked curiously. Of course it needs to eat. The phosphorus powder on its wings can emit a special smell to attract other creatures to come closer. Rather than being an animal, its habits are more like a plant called a pitcher plant. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 1015. Then it shouldn't be dangerous to us, right? Soap lowered the muzzle of his gun and tilted his head to look at the huge moth attached to the wall of the waste pipe. To be honest, I'm a little curious about how it came to be. It's time to eat. This underground space is very big for us, but very narrow for it. Will it really not hit pipes or something when it flies up? Curiosity will not only kill cats, but also people, the clown said. I said it is similar to plants. In addition to passive predation, there is also the absorption of radiant energy, the photosynthesis of plants. When there is sunlight, it absorbs carbon dioxide, releases oxygen, and synthesizes nutrients, and at night, it transforms into completely reverse respiration, absorbing oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide. What you mean is that while the moth is asleep, it will absorb the radiation escaping from the waste tube, but if we wake it up, it will change from the role of absorbing radiation to becoming the radiation source itself. Soap immediately understood the meaning of the clown's words. Yes, and when it senses danger, the amount of radiation it releases will reach a very high value. Even if you wear protective clothing, you can't withstand it, the clown said. 11 years ago, the Institute organized a test team composed entirely of D-class personnel, each of them wearing power armor with the highest protection level, used a remote-controlled bomb to wake it up from a distance of 1 kilometer, in just 40 seconds. The total amount of radiation released by a giant moth is equivalent to the total amount of radiation released by a main reactor in 12 years. Half of the team of D-class personnel died instantly, their bodies dehydrated and turned into skeletons, mummies. Those who were lucky enough not to die immediately could not survive the 24 hours. This test even affected the residential areas on the surface. More than 2,000 people suffered from radiation sickness to varying degrees. The official explanation was a leak of nuclear waste from the main reactor. Tisk, what a guy, Soap exclaimed. How powerful is it? By the way, what are D-class personnel? Are they like those cheap miners who are hired to die? D-class personnel are actually humanoid mice used in the research institute to conduct experiments related to the human body. They are basically composed of death row prisoners who have been deprived of their human rights, the clown explained. Later, the mass production of active ammunition was also used. These D-class personnel are used as material to cultivate flesh-eating worms. It's really cruel. If I were to become a death row prisoner, I would rather eat a peanut on the shooting range. At least this way of death is pleasant, and I don't have to suffer so many crimes before I die, said Soap. You didn't know this, but the spots for D-class personnel are very popular among death row prisoners. The clown shook his head. After becoming a candidate for D-class personnel, you can live for at least a few more months. In a few months later, you may not be assigned a mission that requires death. This is a job that depends entirely on luck. If you can successfully complete the mission and survive, you will not only be released from the status of a death row prisoner and regain your freedom, but you will also receive a large amount of money. As a reward, many people are willing to take advantage of this last chance. Therefore, every time someone from the institute goes to the prison to select D-class personnel, the death row inmates will fight to get a spot. Flow, even causing death. I'm a little curious, do these death row prisoners know the death rate and survival rate of D-class personnel? Noir asked. This probability will not be announced, but the people selected by the institute and the prison guards will secretly reveal a tattletale to these prisoners. At least 1/3 of them have successfully passed the D-class personnel mission and regained freedom. There is a 1/3 chance of not dying, and there is still a reward. It is indeed worth the risk, and it is normal to grab the head. Soap nodded. But what is the real probability? The mortality rate is 100%, and the survival rate is 0%, the Joker said. Even if a D-class personnel successfully completes the task assigned to him, he will be secretly wiped out, or directly forced to be sent for human dissection. The research team. To the people at the Institute, D-class personnel are not human beings, but consumables. The remaining consumables should be disposed of in a harmless manner. It's more ruthless than I thought. I thought at least a few people would be released as publicity benchmarks, said Soap. There is no need to publicize benchmarks, because the death row inmates in prison have no access to information from the outside world, the clown said, and in the agreement for D-class personnel, there are more than 30 confidentiality regulations alone. The outside world is the fundamental. Those who don't know that D-class personnel exist, in the eyes of the prisoners, even if there are D-class personnel outside, they will definitely keep their past experiences secretive. Doesn't anyone doubt the authenticity of this probability? Soap asked again. Of course there will be doubts, but for a person who will be executed tomorrow, he will not let go of any chance to live, and he will not think about the authenticity of this agreement at all, at least, signing that. After signing an agreement and becoming a candidate for D-class personnel, he can indeed live for several more months. This is the only part of the agreement that can be truly fulfilled. The three people walked down while chatting, and walked around a huge waste pillar several times. During this time, the giant moth still made no movement, as if it was really stuck to the waste pillar. The specimens are average. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly passed over their heads and rushed straight towards the giant moth. Soap immediately let out a low cry. What is that? It seems like it's a mouse. As a pilot, Noir has good eyesight and saw the true identity of the black figure at a glance. A flying? No, it should be a mouse that can glide. While he was talking, the gliding mouse had landed on the wings of the giant moth and buried its nose in the fine fluff on the surface of the wings. This mouse is about half a meter long, with shiny black hair. The two ears on the top of its head are pointed and long. Although its limbs are short but extremely advantageous, it hangs its body on the wings of the giant moth with its two pairs of sharp claws. There are fleshy wing membranes connected between the mouse's forelimbs and hind limbs. The reason why it can glide in the air at high speed is because of this pair of thin wing membranes, which can clearly see the blood vessels in them. Mouse, Soap suddenly chuckled, it seems that you, the plane pilot, don't know as much as me, the big guy. This is obviously a bat. Have you heard of the vampire story? The prototypes of the monsters in the story are blood-sucking. Bat. No, compared to bats, the blood relationship of this creature is indeed closer to mice. Soap just finished speaking, and the next second he was slapped in the face by the clown. This is a flying squirrel, also called a flying squirrel. Of course, when Noah's Ark left the earth, there was no such rodent among the living creatures it carried. It was a replica created through genetic engineering. To be precise, it was not a real rodent. Researchers who adjusted the gene sequence also added some gene fragments from other organisms, including part of bat genes, to make its flying ability far exceed that of its ancestors on Earth. P.S. Flying squirrels and mice both belong to the order Rodentia, and bats belong to the order Chiroptera. Logically speaking, the genetic relationship between flying squirrels and mice should be closer. However, I have not researched this point. If there are any mistakes, please point them out in time. Is this guy attracted by the smell emitted by the giant moth? Soap's tone suddenly became nervous. It seems to be eating the wings of the giant moth. Could it be eating the giant moth's wings? Can you wake up the moth? No, predatory behavior like this happens many times a day. If the giant moth wakes up every time, it won't be able to store so much radiation energy in its body, the clown said. You are not interested in the way giant moths eat. Are you interested? Then take a closer look. As soon as the clown finished speaking, dozens of tiny tentacles protruded from under the feathers of the giant moth's wings and entangled the flying squirrel. At first, the flying squirrel struggled fiercely, but as time passed, the intensity became smaller and smaller, until there was no movement at all. This flying squirrel, was it strangled to death? Soap asked. No, it's a paralyzing toxin, that makes the prey incapacitated, then injects digestive fluid into the prey's body, and then absorbs the flesh and blood of the prey dissolved by the digestive fluid through the glands on the surface of the wings. This is how the giant moth eats. Just as the clown was speaking, the flying squirrel's body had begun to show signs of dissolution. When the three of them went around another circle, the flying squirrel's body had been completely absorbed by the giant moth, including its fur and bones. There is nothing left. Even such a big flying squirrel failed to wake it up. No wonder those D-class personnel wanted to use remote-controlled bombs, Soap said. Since it's so difficult for this guy to wake up, I feel a lot more at ease and not as worried as I was just now. There is a very obvious gap at the lower end of the right wing of this giant moth. This should be the trace left by the remote-controlled bomb, right? Noir asked the clown. No, the location where those D-class personnel placed the remote-controlled bomb was the giant moth's torso, and the wounds there have long since healed. The clown shook his head. Then this wound? Noir said in a general way, and suddenly held his breath. Could it be left by other creatures? Is there anything that can hurt this giant moth in this underground maze? Yes, and there are quite a few, the clown said. The actual combat effectiveness of this giant moth is not very strong, especially when facing opponents who are not afraid of radiation. It cannot gain the upper hand. Then we shouldn't encounter those things, right? Soap asked cautiously. Theoretically, no, the clown replied, because it is also difficult for me to deal with those mutated creatures, so I chose the safest route. Noir raised his head and looked at the specimen-like giant moth, and nodded in agreement. From a certain point of view, it is indeed the safest. At least the giant moth will not actively attack approaching creatures unless the opponent is attracted by the pheromones it releases and pounces on it. From the perspective of Soap and the others, this giant moth is indeed a harmless creature. After walking another 100 meters, Soap suddenly patted the mask of his protective suit, stopped, and said, "Clown, wait, I suddenly have an idea." The clown stopped, turned around, stared at the Soap, and asked, "What do you think?" The interior of the Ark must have been occupied by Zeus's group now. There probably won't be many survivors, right? In my opinion, there should be no survivors inside the Ark. The clown nodded. Everyone has been corroded, and those who have been corroded must be dealt with, including myself. The Joker's attitude is very clear. Those who have been eroded are not survivors. Even if they are still alive, even if they still retain their consciousness and reason as human beings, in the Joker's view, these people are also objects that must be dealt with. Just like a high-risk infectious disease spreading among livestock, all infected livestock will be killed and burned as soon as possible to block the spread of pathogens. As for treatment, in the face of large-scale infectious diseases, there is no such thing. Rescue this statement. Then can we think that all the moving objects in the Ark, except ourselves, are enemies? Soap's eyes lit up and he asked. Theoretically, yes, the clown said. There is no news about the other team. It should have been wiped out before they even entered the Ark. Then why don't we find a way to release all these monsters in the underground labyrinth? Let these monsters create chaos, disrupt the enemy's sight, and disrupt their original arrangements. No matter how strong the people under Zeus are, it will still take a lot of time and energy to get rid of these monsters, right? Then we can fish in troubled waters. Whether you want to take back control of the Ark or assassinate Zeus, it will be better than going directly. The core area is much easier. These monsters can completely become our allies, and they are very powerful allies. What you said makes sense. This plan does have certain feasibility. Noir nodded thoughtfully, but in actual implementation, there are several difficulties that we cannot solve. First, Noir continued, how do we find these powerful monsters living in the underground labyrinth? It is extremely difficult for us to just follow the original route, let alone actively search for them. Second, how can we release these monsters onto the ground while ensuring our own safety? If these two problems cannot be solved, then everything is empty talk. P.S. Thanks to book friend 2022060605585675 for the 1000 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 1016. Joker, do you have a way to get in touch with the core mastermind? Soap turned to look at the clown and asked, as long as we can figure out the changing rules of the underground maze, we can put these powerful mutant creatures on the ground. Yes, as long as there is a public communication terminal, I can use the backdoor I left in the core master brain to directly read the data, the clown said, but the consequence of this is that the first time I connect to the core master brain, our location will be locked by Zeus, and my identity will be exposed. If Zeus knows that I have also sneaked into the Ark, the ones who come to hunt us will not be just those little minions. That Zeus, is he very jealous of you? Soap clicked his tongue and continued to ask, do you have any trump card in your hand that can kill him? If there was such a thing, I would have used it a long time ago, the clown said. It's just because Zeus is cautious by nature and extremely controlling. He doesn't like any uncontrollable factors in his plans, and in his eyes, I am one of the few uncontrollable factors. So as long as he discovers my location, he will eliminate me as an uncontrollable factor at all costs. That would be troublesome. Soap's tone was full of regret. If we can really release these monsters, we will definitely send a big surprise to that Zeus. He is not the most annoying. Are there controllable factors? If these monsters run to the ground, then the Ark will be full of uncontrollable factors. See if he feels uncomfortable. Just when Soap was thinking that his monster ally plan could be launched smoothly, the clown who was walking at the front suddenly stopped. What's going on? Soap was distracted and almost hit the clown's back. Fortunately, the tentacle connected to his protective suit tightened in time, which prevented him from losing his balance and falling to the ground. Are there any dangerous mutant creatures nearby? Noir suddenly became alert, raised his gun, and looked around nervously. They are still traveling on the wastepipe plank road. It is not ideal to fight mutant creatures in this place, not only because the space is narrow and there is no room to dodge, but what is more terrible is that the aftermath of the battle awakens the giant above them. The moth, Soap, and Noir will all be killed by the super radiation released by the giant moth, without even a chance to escape. No, it's a person, a human being. The clown's words showed a doubtful tone for the first time, and he's also a human being who has not been corroded. Humans. How can there be humans here? Soap was stunned, and then whispered, could it be someone sent by Zeus? He has already discovered our traces. No, if it is someone sent by Zeus, there is no way there are no traces of erosion. The clown shook his head and rejected it. Can you sense where that person is? Noir asked. It's 80 meters directly below us. Can other information be sensed? For example, the person's status, vital signs, etc. I can only sense a general location and the degree of corrosion in his body. No other information is known, the clown said, but at least one thing can be confirmed, he is still alive. Noir hesitated for half a second and asked, shall we go over and have a look too? He's blocking the way we must pass. Even if we don't want to run into him, we can't avoid him. Soap curled his lips, pulled the bolt of the gun, and loaded a bullet into the chamber. Don't forget, the path we are taking now cannot be stopped or turned back. I think you can try to contact humans who have not been corroded. The clown nodded. Don't let your guard down. This sudden appearance of a person, to me, is also an unplanned and uncontrollable factor. In case we conflict with him, I may not be able to guarantee the safety of both of you. It's okay, we also have guns in our hands, Soap responded. As long as you are sure that it is a person and not a monster, then there is nothing to be afraid of. Speaking of which, Does the undead crew have all the information about the underground labyrinth? Noir asked again. Then have you ever found traces of human activities in the underground labyrinth before? Never before, the clown said. This person either entered the underground maze recently, or he is extremely familiar with the underground maze and can avoid the path of the detection robots every time. Extremely familiar with the underground labyrinth. After hearing this keyword, Soap suddenly became excited. Isn't our plan just missing such a person? Isn't this just the pillow that was handed to the side when I was sleeping? Don't be too eager to be happy. We don't know whether the other party is an enemy or a friend. Noir seemed relatively calm. Even if that person is familiar with the underground maze, he may not be willing to assist us. Go and take a look first. The clown made a decision. The three people slowed down their movement slightly and moved down quietly. As for the person perceived by the clown, it remained in place and did not move. After walking around the waste pipe again, the three of them stopped and looked at each other silently. They all knew that as long as they walked a short distance ahead, they would be able to see that person. At the same time, they will also be exposed to each other's vision. There is no cover on this plank road, and it is impossible to sneak up on him unless the clown hangs himself on the edge of the plank road with his tentacles and hangs directly from above. However, this sudden appearance method can easily cause excessive stimulation to the other party and lead to misunderstanding. If the other party identifies the three of them as enemies, it will be troublesome. The three people's primary goal is to negotiate. After all, that person may be a person who is familiar with the underground labyrinth environment. Such a person will be of great help to their next actions. Whether you want to implement Soap's monster ally plan or follow the Joker's original plan to sneak through the underground maze directly into the core area of the Ark, if you can have a guide, the difficulty of the operation will be instantly reduced by several levels. Let me go out first, Neville said to Clown and Soap through lip language. He took off his weapons and other equipment and handed them to Soap. He took a deep breath and walked out as slowly as possible. A thin human figure appeared in Noir's field of vision. He was leaning on the scrap pillar, holding a killed flying squirrel in his left hand, and holding an irregular piece of metal in his right hand, cutting the flying squirrel's abdominal cavity into pieces. Cut it open. This should be a male human being, but he does not have any hair on his body, his skin is pale, and his skin has a strange smooth feeling. The existence of pores cannot be seen with the naked eye, it is like someone with strong self-healing ability. After a creature is severely burned, the scabs fall off and new skin grows back. This man's face was like a skeleton. The bloodless skin stretched tightly on the skull, completely showing the outline of the bones. The eye sockets were sunken, and the upper and lower lips were thin and short, unable to cover the sharp teeth. His teeth are completely different from those of normal humans. There are no differences between incisors, canines, and molars. The entire set of teeth are fangs like wild beasts. Noir even felt that even if he did not rely on the metal piece in his hand, he could bite the flying squirrel into pieces and swallow it with just his fangs. Noir took 2 more steps forward, but the other party didn't seem to see him at all. He was concentrating on handling the flying squirrel carcass in his hands. He skillfully cut through the fur and muscles, and pulled out the flying squirrel's intestines. It was stuffed into a dirty little bag. During the process, he would occasionally scrape off some fat-like substance from the removed internal organs and stuff it into his mouth haphazardly. He seems to be very hungry, but he maintains his sanity as a human being. This is like humans in primitive society. Although they drink blood from their hair, they will not pounce directly on their prey after killing it. The difference in eating behavior, this is one of the biggest differences between humans and beasts. This man was also wearing a set of very shabby off-white clothes and trousers. The cuffs and trousers had been frayed. There used to be some black words printed on the armbands and the back, but now these marks are fragmented and large. The area was peeled off, and it was impossible to tell what was once printed on it. but Noir knew very well that the clothes on the other party had absolutely no protective effect. Even if there were, the damage to the clothes had made it lose most of its effectiveness, not to mention that the man was not wearing a helmet or gloves, and even his feet were bare. Why is this person not affected by radiation? A question appeared in Noir's heart. He has seen many miners who unfortunately suffered from radiation sickness due to mining in radiation zones. The most obvious symptoms of acute radiation sickness are skin ulcers, muscle dissolution, and large-scale bleeding throughout the body, while chronic radiation sickness is similar to malignant tumors. It's just that compared to the tumors that grow in the body, patients with chronic radiation sickness will also have many disgusting-looking growths on their body surfaces. Most of these patients will be sent to a place called the sick village go. But the man in front of him, although he looked very strange, did not meet the symptoms of acute radiation sickness, nor did he meet the symptoms of chronic radiation sickness. In addition to malnutrition and poor hygiene, his physical condition did not seem to be the same. Not too bad. The flying speed of flying squirrels is very fast. Noir has seen it just now. Since this person can hunt flying squirrels, it means that his skills will not be much worse. That is not something that patients with radiation sickness can do. 2 things. Hello, how are you? Noir took another step closer and took the initiative to say hello. The moment Noir made a sound, the man suddenly jumped up from the ground as if he had been burned by the floor, picked up the unfinished body of the flying squirrel, and ran wildly in the opposite direction. No, this guy wants to escape. At this time, Soap also rushed out. Seeing that the other party was about to disappear around the corner, he hurriedly shouted, "Clown! Quick! Stop him!" In fact, there was no need for Soap to say much. The clown had already taken action. 2 tentacles shot out quickly, wrapped around the man's ankles, pulled him directly, and then forcibly dragged him back. This guy didn't react when he saw me. I thought he didn't care. Who knew he ran away as soon as I said hello? Noir said. He didn't see you. After living in the underground maze for a long time, his vision has completely deteriorated, but his hearing has become very sharp, the clown said. My hearing isn't very sharp, it's only 20 meters away. Some indigenous creatures would have been alarmed by our footsteps, Soap questioned. He just had his back against a waste pipe with strong radiation. The radiation released by the waste pipe will affect the human hearing center. It is normal that he did not hear our footsteps. Perhaps in his opinion, this area is the territory of the giant moth. There will be no invasion by other powerful mutated creatures, it belongs to the safe zone, so we relax our vigilance, the clown said. By the way, who is this person? He looks like a ghoul from a horror story. Soap looked at the man who was subdued by the tentacles but still struggling and said, speaking of which, why can this guy survive in such a high-intensity radiation environment? Won't he suffer from radiation sickness and die? He is the same as me, his body has mutated, the clown said. It's just that the source of my mutation is erosion, and his is a mutation in the true sense. To be precise, it is evolution. As a human being, he should have died in the underground labyrinth, but his strong survival instinct caused his body to evolve on its own, and evolved a constitution that can survive in a radiation environment. This probability is very low, but it is not completely zero. Noir pursed his lips and moved his gaze from the man to the clown. From your tone, it seems that you already know his identity. This should be a D-class personnel who was sent to the underground maze for experiments. The off-white pantsuit he is wearing is specially prepared by the Institute for D-class personnel. It's just that the above the locator and vital sign monitoring device have been removed. It is estimated that this D-class personnel has been deemed dead in the Institute's files, but no one expected that he could actually survive in such a desperate situation. Creating a miracle of life, even the clown, who had never shown any emotion or anger, now had a hint of emotion in his tone. Who are you? After struggling to no avail, This D-class personnel spit out these few words from his throat with great difficulty. His voice was dry and hoarse, and his pronunciation was also very strange. It's weird and difficult to understand. It's obvious that he hasn't spoken to anyone for a long time, which has led to a certain degree of degradation in the vocal system and language center. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 1017. Chapter 977. Ulrich Nowitzki. The clown took it out, took out the dagger, opened a hidden pocket on the inside of the opponent's cuff, and dug out a metal plate buried in the fabric. This is a spare positioning device and information card. However, due to high-intensity ionizing radiation, the electronic components inside have been scrapped, the clown said. Even so, this metal plate also serves as an identity plate. In addition to this D-class personnel, there is also a QR code that records some identity information. Soap took out his communication device, only to find a black and white snowflake on the screen. The radiation in this place is too strong, unless it is the kind of equipment specially designed for strong radiation environments with protective measures. Ordinary electronic equipment, the precision components inside cannot escape the damage at all. The clown glanced at the scrapped communication equipment in Soap's hand, took off his gloves, stroked the lines of the QR code on the nameplate with his thumb, and said directly, "Ulrich Nowitzki, a D-class personnel of the Institute, No D36512. Gender, male, born on January 5, 914 in the New Era, former soldier of the Artillery Battalion of the 1st Regiment of the 2nd Division of the 4th Mobile Armored Corps of the Field Corps. He escaped from the battle and murdered his superiors, which in turn prevented friendly units from supporting the entire army. He was annihilated and sentenced to death by the military court. 3 days before his execution, on August 5, New Era 947, he was granted a place in the D-class reserve and the death penalty was cancelled. You can actually scan codes with your fingers." Soap glanced at the clown in surprise, but compared with the clown's other abilities, physically reading QR codes is not something outrageous. The clown ignored Soap and continued reading. On August 30, 947, New Era, this D-class personnel was selected by Research Group 4507 to participate in a project called Human Potential Stimulation Test under Extreme Environments, archive serial number CL2963. The Joker paused and then said, "I have an impression of this mission. When I was searching for other files in the dark well, I accidentally caught a glimpse of it. On September 2, New Era 947, the first batch of D-class personnel were released. Arriving at the number 4 test site located in the underground maze, 45 minutes later, all the vital signs of this batch of D-class personnel returned to zero. The research team immediately sent a second batch of D-class personnel to examine the corpses and bodies of the first batch of D-class personnel. The equipment was recovered, but the second batch of D-class personnel lost contact less than 15 minutes after entering the test site. Later, the detection robot only recovered less than half of the bodies of D-class personnel, and the remaining corpses that could not be recovered were determined to be he was eaten by mutated creatures in the testing site. This person was one of the second batch of D-class personnel who entered the testing site and lost contact. This guy was thrown into this hellish place in the year 947 of the New Era? If that's the case, wouldn't he have been here for more than 5 years? Soap looked at the man named Ulrich in shock. Nowitzki's former D-class personnel, to be honest, I feel like staying here for 5 days, no, 5 hours is a kind of torture. How did he survive here for more than 5 years? The final experiment of the human potential stimulation test under extreme environment in Kuroi's archives was a failure because none of the D-class personnel who were put into the number 4 proving ground could survive 72 hours. The clown said, but if the research team discovers this person, the final conclusion of the experimental report will probably be completely rewritten. Surviving in an underground maze for 5 years and avoiding the detection robots that patrolled back and forth between the pipes, How did you do it? Noir squatted down and stared at Urich and asked. You are people from the Research Institute. Ulrich's language ability is gradually recovering. Although he is no longer struggling, his face is full of horror. Of course, his horror after seeing his face. Ordinary people would probably become even more frightened than him. Don't worry, we are not from the Institute. Seeing the hope of communicating with the other party, Zhao Zhao felt happy and quickly said in as gentle tone as possible, we also accidentally broke into this damn place. As for the Institute, to be honest, I don't like those people in white coats either. They all have their eyes above their heads, their brains are not normal, and they don't take ordinary people's lives as their own. These guys deserve to humming die. As Soap said, he also winked at Joker and Neville. If he wanted to win the favor of the other party, he had to make the other party think that he was on the same side as him, so discrediting the Institute was naturally a good choice. Of course, the Institute itself is indeed dark enough. What Soap said is actually the truth and cannot be said to be a deliberate smear campaign. Research Institute, damn it. When Soap said this, Ulrich's eyes lit up, he nodded vigorously, and said in a sharp voice, damn it. Damn it. Damn it. Do you want to take revenge on those bastards at the Institute? Kill them all. Pay them back 1,000 times for what they did to you. Seeing that his words were effective, Soap continued to use words to induce him. Revenge, kill them. Kill people from the Institute. Ulrich was stunned for a moment. Although 5 years have passed, the image of the Institute in his heart still cannot be shaken. How is it possible? Impossible. Revenge, impossible. What if I told you there was a chance? Don't you want to give it a try? Soap patted Ulrich on the shoulder, and at the same time motioned to the clown to loosen the tentacles that bound him. Opportunity? What to do? Ulrich's eyes widened, he looked at the Soap and then at Noir. When he moved his eyes to the clown and saw the tentacles that had not been retracted, there was a very obvious change in his expression, not fear, but a feeling of peace of mind. When Soap expressed his position to Urich just now, there was still a trace of suspicion in Urich's eyes, but after seeing the clown's tentacles, this trace of suspicion completely disappeared. Are you, also, someone who was used by the Institute for experiments? Ulrich struggled to get such a complete sentence out of his mouth. The clown nodded and said, yes. So, I also want to destroy the Institute. Okay. Everyone in the Institute, all deserves to die. Ulrich suddenly laughed, ha 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 ha. Everyone. Everyone deserves to die. This guy's mental state seems a little abnormal. Soap lightly touched Neville with his elbow and said with some concern. Anyone who stays in a place like this for 5 years will have some mental problems. Noir replied in a low voice, if it were me, I might be even crazier than him now. No, if it were me, I wouldn't have lasted 5 years, I would have committed suicide long ago. Me too. Days like this are scary enough just to think about. Soap and Noir were still whispering, but Urich had already gotten up from the ground, waving his arms somewhat crazily, shouting, kill them all. Kill them all. No, they should be thrown into the come to this place. We can't let them die immediately. Yes, that's what we should do. Well, Ulrich, calm down first. Those people do deserve to die, but if we want to take revenge, we must first find a way to get out of this place. Soap said, can you tell me how you survived in this place for 5 years? Of 5 years. Ulrich turned his head and stared at Soap. I have to admit that being stared at by such a person who looks exactly like a mummy will indeed make people feel a chill down their spines, but Soap still gritted his teeth. Responded, yes, 5 years. How did you survive? No other D-class personnel even survived 72 hours. 5 years. Ulrich suddenly raised his voice. He stretched out his skinny palm and raised 5 fingers. 5 years. Do you know how I got here in the past 5 years? No. I don't know. Soap shook his head crisply. I. Ulrich seemed to want to remember, but he suddenly squatted down holding his head, a look of pain on his face, and his long and sharp nails dug deeply into his scalp. Bright red blood flowed down his bald head. Don't be impatient, think about it slowly. Soap thought for a while, took out a syringe from his bag, and handed it over. By the way, I have some good stuff here, do you want some? What he handed over was a bottle of military stimulants. As someone who had served in the field corps, Soap knew that most soldiers would have some drug addiction problems. Not only when the battle was fierce, soldiers would inject drugs, they will also choose to use drugs when their mental state is unstable, overtired, insomnia, or even craving for cigarettes or sexual desire arises and cannot be solved in time. Although the military has very clear restrictions on this type of drugs, drug abuse has been banned repeatedly. Later, the top military officials had a semi-giving up attitude, as long as the troops can exert their combat effectiveness during the war. As for these soldiers, a series of legacy problems that arose after retirement were directly left to other departments to wipe their butts. After seeing the familiar syringe, Ulrich immediately snatched it over, first held it under his nose like a cigarette and sniffed it vigorously, then skillfully unscrewed the protective cover and inserted the needle into his vagina. And crushed the small glass bubble filled with compressed air at the end of the syringe. The liquid medicine was injected into the muscles driven by compressed air, and Ulrich let out a comfortable groan, and his originally rapid breathing gradually calmed down. Let me think. Ulrich sat down holding the empty syringe and began to remember. I remember, at that time, those damn whitecoats asked me and 6 other people to go to the test site to recover the bodies of the last batch of unlucky people. They didn't give us any protective equipment, they just gave us a trailer used to hold corpses. As soon as I walked out of the passage, I felt a tingling sensation on my skin. Test Area 4 is a high radiation area, very similar to where we are now, the clown explained to Soap and Noir in a low voice. Moreover, there is a gregarious mutant creature living there that is very aggressive. We soon found the bodies of those unlucky ones. They seemed to have been attacked by something. The scattered body parts were everywhere. I knew at that time that if we stayed, we would also die and would be with each other. They are the same, Ulrich continued. If we want to recover all these corpses, it will take several hours at least, but we just went down, and some people started to have nosebleeds. Nosebleeds are one of the obvious symptoms of acute radiation sickness. If people with such symptoms cannot get treatment in time, they are not far from death. I told others that if we follow the requirements of those white coats, not only will we not be acquitted, but we will die here like the first batch of people. Ulrich said, even if we don't die, radiation will also be eaten by the monsters living in this place. I told them that if they want to live, they can only escape. This underground maze is very big, and not all the white coats can be found everywhere. If we can find an exit to the surface, we can survive. This guy is really a deserter, Noir complained in his heart. When he was a soldier in the field army, he killed his own commander and escaped from the battlefield. Now he has become a D-class cannon fodder, and he still has it in his head, thinking about running away all the time. For Noir, he was disgusted from the bottom of his heart by cowards like Ulrich who murdered their superiors, disobeyed orders, and escaped from battle, leading to the total destruction of friendly forces. He did not think there was anything wrong with the verdict of the military court at all. After all, who he also didn't want such a teammate to be encountered by him. However, this guy was still useful to them now, and he had to suppress the disgust in his heart and listen to Ulrich tell the story. As for Soap, he doesn't have so many inner thoughts, he himself can be considered a escape party. Before participating in this operation, he had planned escape plans and routes more than once. Some people are unwilling to escape, saying that the only way to escape is to die, so it is better to stay and complete their work. Ulrich said this, with a trace of disdain and hatred on his face. How did they know that those in white coats were from? They had no intention of letting us live from the beginning. They even plan to report us in an attempt to make merit in this way and gain a chance of survival. What happened next? Soap already guessed what was going to happen next. You killed them all. Yes, we killed those who wanted to raise the alarm, and then fled to the depths of the underground labyrinth. Many people died, they all died, I am the only one who survived. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 1018. How did you survive? Soap immediately asked. I ran for a long time, I don't know how long. Urich recalled, I collected the little dry food and water left under the others, and it lasted for about 5 days, no, maybe 6 days. Later, I remember that I fell ill, a very serious illness that almost killed me. At that time, I felt like every organ in my body had melted, and my skin was burning and painful. Rubbing it will remove the skin and the bloody flesh underneath, I can't remember exactly. Anyway, that feeling is more painful than death. What happened next? Soap asked again. This is obviously a symptom of acute radiation sickness, and it is in the late stage of severe disease. Generally, people who have reached this stage can already prepare for their funeral. Even if they are provided with the most advanced medical methods in the Ark civilization at this stage, they will not be able to survive. There is no way to get people back from the Lord of Hell, although the whole body cybernetic body can replace the tissues and organs that have been necrotic due to radiation. The human brain is the only part of the cybernetic body that cannot be replaced. Although the brain is the most resistant part of the human body to electromagnetic radiation, in the late stages of acute radiation sickness, the lymphocytes and hematopoietic systems of the whole body are severely damaged. Even if the brain cells themselves are not damaged by radiation, they will still be damaged by other damaged system implication. In the case of complete loss of self-immunity and hematopoietic ability, the invasion of viruses and bacteria, lack of oxygen supply, etc. will pose fatal threats to the brain. Symptoms of cerebral infarction may occur as mildly as in severe cases, it can lead to direct brain death. I don't know, I can't remember how many days passed. These painful symptoms gradually disappeared. When I regained consciousness, my strength came back, the original skin turned into a layer of dry, hard, the fragile shell took a long time to completely fall off. Ulrich stretched out his hands, the nails fell off and never grew back. Soap lowered his head and looked at Ulrich's hands carefully. Although his fingers had no nails, their fingertips were covered with a hard cuticle, just like the claws of a beast. You don't know how you survived, Noir muttered. Acute radiation sickness, just recovered on its own. This possibility does exist, the clown nodded. The human gene sequence has infinite evolutionary possibilities. These evolutionary branches cannot be programmed even by the most advanced genetic engineering technology. They can only be developed when certain conditions are met. Unlock it by yourself. The Institute conducts this experiment to allow these D-class personnel who are put into testing to evolve, or mutate, under the stimulation of extreme environments. As long as a successful sample can appear, they can learn from this sample. Find breakthrough points among genetic changes and expand the scope of gene editing technology. The existing genetic engineering technology of Ark civilization is not as simple as inserting a few key characters directly into the code like computer programming. Every existing gene editing technology is obtained through countless trials and errors. Valuable experience, there are countless genetic changes, and 99.9% of them end in death. Only the path with a probability infinitely close to zero is feasible. The Institute's experiments are to continuously drive experimental subjects into these forks in the road and observe their subsequent changes. Most of the forked roads lead to cliffs or traps, but as long as there are enough roads to choose from, one or two of them will always work, and these roads that work will become the focus of subsequent gene editing project research. Direction. For example, in the old era, there was a rare disease with a mortality rate of 100%. Everyone who suffered from this disease died without exception. But one day, a special patient miraculously recovered. The doctors conducted the most detailed examination of the recovered patient and found that there were some obvious special features in the patient's genes. But doctors don't know which special place leads to the recovery of terminal illness. They can only choose to try, using the most common control variable method in science, to try little by little. This is a very stupid method, but it is the most reliable method. After it is determined that a mutation in a certain gene can make people immune to the disease, gene therapy for this rare disease will officially appear, but in this process, thousands of people will undergo clinical trials. Patients die, and only a handful of lucky ones can choose the right road to survive. Ulrich is such a lucky person who is 1 in a million, it can even be said to be 1 in a million. No. I think self-healing from radiation sickness is not the key. Soap glanced at the clown. Intentionally or unintentionally, radiation is not the key. The key is how you survived in this place for 5 years without being discovered by ARC's detection robot. To be honest, even if this place has no radiation at all, I don't think I can stay here for 5 years. How do you avoid those mutated creatures, and how do you identify the direction here? The structure of the underground maze is every step, every second changes, and I don't believe you can keep track of them all, not even the Joker can. What? Soap's series of questions immediately confused Ulrich. He hadn't communicated with humans for a long time. Even his language ability was still slowly recovering, and his brain was still recovering after a while. He had not changed from his previous way of thinking that was close to that of a beast. Soap's barrage of questions made him unable to resist, and almost caused Ulrich's brain to shut down. Answer one question at a time. Don't worry. Noir patted Ulrich's shoulder comfortingly, took out a bottle of diluted military stimulant and stuffed it into him. You tell us first, how did you identify the direction in this place? The direction? I don't know either. Ulrich shook his head. I just walked based on my feelings. Have you ever been lost? I don't know. Ulrich still shook his head, but if I want to go to a place, I can always get there, just like here. I know that the big bug up there is very quiet and it is not a threat to me, but other monsters never come close to here because of the existence of this big bug. So, every time I catch prey, I will come here to eat. Also, Ulrich continued, this big bug releases a strange smell. It smells to me like. Ulrich repeated the word like several times, as if he was searching for a suitable adjective, and it seemed that he had forgotten the things in human society that could be used as metaphors. He was stuck. After a while, he said, I don't know what kind of smell it is. Anyway, it is a kind of smell. I don't feel anything about it, but it will attract some other small things to pounce on it. At this time, I can catch it. We caught a lot of prey. Ulrich grabbed the body of the flying squirrel as if to show off, and said to Soap and the others, this is what I caught here. It flies very fast, but as long as you see the opportunity and pounce on it, there's meat to eat. It seems like this guy is not lost. Soap and Noir looked at each other. No matter where he goes, he can return to this place. Obviously, he has regarded this place as a safe zone. Could it be biological instinct? Noir wanted to reach out to lift his chin, but it was empty. The chest of the protective suit and the helmet are connected together, and when viewed from the front, it looks like it is divided into 2 parts. It's like an iron bucket. A person wearing this thing can't even touch his own neck, let alone his chin. I heard that in the past, there were creatures called migratory birds on the Earth. They would travel back and forth between 2 fixed habitats every season. Some of the distant habitats even spanned half the Earth, but these migratory birds never lost my way, Noir continued. This guy is a human being, and we are human beings too. Why don't we have this instinct? Soap said, even the kind of cyborg modified person who puts a positioning device into his head cannot be in this underground maze. Move freely. The structure of the underground maze is very complex, with many upper and lower floors. It is a constantly changing three-dimensional space, not a two-dimensional flat area that can be expressed with a map. Even if they are given a navigation system that can function normally device, they can't get out of this maze. He is different from us. Noir shook his head vigorously. Have you ever seen an ordinary person who can recover from acute radiation sickness without receiving any treatment? For this reason alone, he is different from us. Just when Soap was still about to argue with Noir, the Joker spoke up. I don't think you have to struggle with this kind of thing at all, we just need to pursue the results now. As for the process, I don't care. As for the reasons, I don't care even more. What you said seems to make sense, so how do you plan to pursue the results? Soap was stunned for a moment and asked. Yurich Nowitzki, do you want to seek revenge from the people at the Institute, so that those in white coats can experience what you have experienced in the past 5 years? The clown looked at Ulrich, shocked. Vocal channel. Yes. I want them to die? No, simply dying is too cheap for them. I want them to live a life worse than death and suffer all kinds of torture. I will do what I have experienced 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. Give it back to them. Ulrich, who had already calmed down, became excited again. He waved his skinny arms vigorously, not even caring that the prey in his hands was thrown to the ground. We have a plan. Do you want to participate? The clown asked again. What's the plan? You should know that there are many very powerful monsters in this place, right? I know, those monsters, some are even more terrifying than the Thunder Beast. I don't even dare to get close to the edge of their territory. When he mentioned those monsters, Ulrich shuddered involuntarily, and his voice, they are much smaller. Can you sense those powerful monsters in the underground labyrinth? Soap widened his eyes and asked with a hint of surprise. Ulrich nodded. Yes, but I never go near those places. Then if I ask you to take us to find those monsters, can you find them? The clown asked again. No. I will die, and so will you. You don't know how terrifying those monsters are. Everyone who sees them will be killed. Don't go near those places. Strange, since you have been close to these places and have never seen those monsters, how do you know they are scary? Soap asked, confused. I can't tell, but anyway, I know it. Ulrich showed a hysterical look on his face. If you want to go, you can go by yourselves. Anyway, I will not go near those places until I die. But you can determine the general location of those monsters, right? The clown asked. Ulrich was startled for a moment, then nodded hesitantly. If we plan to put these monsters on the ground and let the white coats of the Institute face these monsters, are you willing to help us? This plan is very risky, but the feasibility is not low, as long as it can help us solve 2 problems. Put these monsters on the ground and let them kill those damn white coats. Ulrich stared at the clown in a daze, and after a few seconds he asked, are you sure, you can do it? As long as you are willing to help us, there is a high probability that we can do it. The clown nodded solemnly. How do you want me to help? First, you have to help us locate these powerful monsters so that we can find them, the clown said. Second, you have to help us find an exit to the ground, and it has to be big enough to allow us to the exits through which those monsters pass. Third, you have to tell us the route between those monsters and the exit. As for the riskiest task of leading the monsters to the exit, you are not required to participate. It's over. I think the second point is useless, Soap said to Noir. If this guy knew the exit to the ground, he would have run out long ago. How could he stay in this ghost place for 5 years? But Soap never expected that he would be slapped in the face the next second. I know the exits. There are many exits to the ground, some are very big, Urich said confidently. Since you know the exit, why don't you leave here? Are you a masochist? Soap felt a little confused on his face and asked immediately. There are those white coats on the ground. If I were caught by them, it would be worse than staying in this place. A trace of very real fear flashed in Ulrich's eyes. For those in the institute, he, in addition to hatred, there is more fear in my heart. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 1019. 4 days later. Mukok Fortress, above. A giant battleship with a length of more than 700 meters slowly sailed into the airspace directly above the fortress. The huge shadow almost enveloped most of the fortress, attracting many officers and soldiers who were training and preparing on the ground to stop and look up. This heavy cruiser still has the original color of the alloy material all over its body. It has not been painted or decorated. It looks like it has just been rushed out of the dock. But from another perspective, these unmodified welds and traces and exposed rivets give this battleship a rough temperament, coupled with the condescending muzzle of the triple-mounted heavy plasma main gun pointing diagonally. On the ground, as long as it was parked in the air, an indescribable pressure spread. The main guns of ordinary heavy cruisers are single-barreled large-caliber plasma cannons, but this battleship is equipped with a high-efficiency energy converter discovered from the ruins of the Alpha civilization and a stronger magnetic field generator, which increases the number of main guns. It was able to be tripled and its firepower was greatly enhanced. Although there were only 4 days, during these 4 days, relying on the guidance of the Hive Master, Kaylan, and others ransacked 8S level and A-level ruins that had not exceeded 20% of the previous exploration progress, earning plenty of water. The technologies left over from the Alpha civilization may not be digested for a while, but the ready-made equipment can be used directly. A lot of equipment that Yagunactor couldn't use was sent directly to the Griffin Fortress shipyard, and all of it was installed on this freshly baked Orca-class heavy cruiser. For example, the power furnace that can support triple plasma cannons, heavy cruise-class engines and super-large energy shields is the core power supply device of an A-class ruins. In the language of Alpha civilization, this thing is called City Heart. This is a level 3 city heart, which is enough to maintain the operation of all public facilities in a city of 500,000 people. If converted into the output power of a power plant, it is about 150 between 1 megawatt and 200 megawatts. The power furnace alone is the heart of the battleship. This Orca-class heavy cruiser is enough to crush all the aircraft carrier battleships in the original ARC Air Force fleet. If we are given enough materials and time, we can build many more warships like this, and it will not be a problem to even form a fleet. These are the original words of the chief engineer of the 4th shipyard of Griffin Fortress, in K. when Lan filled the shipyard's yard with those once extremely rare relics of Alpha civilization. The chief engineer's self-confidence was simply inflated to the extreme. As a person who has designed and built warships all his life, who doesn't desire to personally build an invincible fleet? Unfortunately, the materials were sufficient, but time did not allow him to build the entire fleet. The situation outside the Ark is deteriorating day by day. Every day, the area of the fleshy carpet covering the surface of the Ark will expand a lot, and the monsters bred in the sarcoids will become stronger and more incredible. Assuming that these monsters will become the main force to stop Kaylan and his side in the next battle, then the current Ark is like the ultimate explosion operation in an RTS game, with all resources invested in the expansion of the army. In a very short period of time, a staggering army was drawn out. Of course, Kaylan and the others did not know whether Ark had really invested all its resources, but according to drone observations, in the past 4 days, the number of sarcomas that gave birth to monsters had increased several times faster than before. The total number was more than 10 times that of 4 days ago. This is only the surface condition of the Ark that can be observed by them. What Kaylan is most worried about are the changes within Ark. Now they don't have any real-time intelligence from inside the Ark. All the reconnaissance and infiltration troops sent to the Ark have disappeared without any news. No one knows what the inside of the Ark looks like now, and whether there are any survivors is completely unknown. Except for General Maginot, who still had a glimmer of hope for those reconnaissance teams, Everyone else agreed that even if they waited for another 4 or 40 days, there would be no results. The loss of contact with the reconnaissance troops has caused them to lose the initiative. The only way to regain this initiative is to use a large army to suppress the situation and use the simplest and crudest but most effective reconnaissance method: fire reconnaissance. The cannons are going up and blasting his mother. No matter how much the area of the fleshy carpet has increased, no matter what level the monsters have been transformed into, in short, the triple-mounted plasma main cannon will be blasted directly in the face, and it depends on whether the opponent will take the attack or not. However, Kaylan and the others are not completely helpless. The master of the Hive City gave Kaylan a batch of battleship design drawings. These design drawings are not from the Alpha civilization, but the legacy left by the Hive City civilization, the Hive City civilization. Unlike the Alpha civilization, the text is logical. After K-Ian's translation, it can be converted into the language used by the Ark civilization. Therefore, these design drawings can be read by the technicians of the shipyard. Kaylan chose 2 models of warships. Both models are small warships. The classification within the Hive civilization is the armor-breaking cone class and the one-handed mallet class. The former is a high-mobility surprise landing. The ship does not have many weapons and equipment, but it is equipped with a high-strength shield generator, thick bow armor and powerful thrusters. It can penetrate directly into the core of the enemy's formation like a real armor-piercing cone. Then, the Marine troops carried on the ship will carry out a decapitation strike on the enemy's command center. The latter ship, as its name suggests, is a one-handed mallet that completely abandons defense and pursues a one-hit detached, one-hit killing style of play. It equips a lightly armored light high-mobility warship with an oversized weapon that only heavy-duty warships can equip: caliber main gun. It is better to say that it is a gun installed on the battleship. It is better to say that this gun is used as the main body, and a propeller and a bridge are installed on it. The combat idea of the one-handed hammer class battleship is also very simple. Relying on high mobility to enter the range of the main gun, aim at the target, fire and bombard, and then quickly distance yourself from the enemy, waiting for the next attack opportunity. In fact, there are many more powerful warships in the design drawings provided by the Hive Master, but Kaylan only chose these 2 for a reason. These 2 warships require less materials and have many technical difficulties to overcome. With the conditions of Griffin Fortress 4th Shipyard, large-scale mass production will soon be possible. If the comfort of the cabin inside the ship is not taken into consideration and practicality is the only priority, the construction period of a single warship can even be reduced to less than 2 months. Of course, the main reason is that these 2 warships require very few operators, not counting the shipboard landing force. The armor-breaking cone assault landing ship only requires 4 people to operate: a captain. It is enough to be a helmsman, a fire controller, a mechanic in charge of the engine room, and a dispatcher in charge of controlling the landing module. As for the one-handed mallet class high-mobility fire support ship, the crew has been reduced to 3 people. Under the current situation, Kaylan and the others do not have time to train new recruits. The operators of all battleships can only be selected from the survivors of Fleet Zero. Once the battle between them and Ark enters a stalemate, Griffin the base's shipyard became the key. Someone must pilot the battleships produced by the 4th shipyard. Only ships without people cannot form combat capabilities. For this reason, most of the survivors of the Zero fleet were divided into 2 groups. One group remained on Yagunactor, a group stayed at Muka Fortress and Griffin Fortress. They were very valuable troops, and Kaylan had no intention of putting them into the first round of battle. If all these people are fired, then no one will really open the newly built warships. Captain Alexander, standing on the bridge of the Orca-class cruiser, looking straight at the distant horizon, Maginot suddenly felt a surge of pride in his heart for no reason. In the first half of his life, all he could think about was how to climb to a higher position and command an army to fight have never been within his scope of consideration. Maginot once even felt that he would not be able to experience any major battles until he retired. He just needs to act like a civilian officer, no, or rather like a business executive, sitting in the office counts as working. As for the fighting and killing, there will always be someone who will do it, but no matter who it is impossible for them to get their turn. But life seemed to play a little joke on him. On the plain below, an army of 200,000 people was gathered. This was the only remaining army of the entire human civilization. They were about to place all their bets and make a desperate effort to fight. The outcome and winning rate of this war are completely unknown. Adrenaline diluted the fear and uneasiness in his heart. Maginot even felt that even if the rudder of the battleship was given to him, he would dare to drive the battleship directly into the Ark. What the guy from the Hound said was right. Since there is nothing to lose, there is nothing to worry about. The worst is to risk your life. Death is a frightening thing, but it is also something that everyone has to experience. After understanding this, Maginot seemed not to be so afraid of death. He took a deep breath and continued, "Have you ever thought about what to name your new flagship?" "Name?" Major General Alexander was stunned for a moment, then turned to look at Maginot. "The internal number of this Orca-class heavy cruiser in the Air Force fleet is NF-159, but the name of the battleship itself has not been decided yet. I have read relevant documents and there are 3 pre-selected names. To be honest, they are not suitable for the current atmosphere. This Orca-class heavy cruiser was originally scheduled to be delivered to the 1st Cruise Fleet. Since the Orca-class is a warship that focuses on defense, most of its names are based on Guard and Strong Shield. They are made up of similar words, but what they need now is not a shield that is solid enough, but a spear that can pierce everything without hesitation." To be honest, I'm not very good at naming." Major General Alexander shrugged helplessly and asked the question to Kaylan. "Kaylan, how about you do it?" "Shall I choose a name?" Kaylan thought for a moment and said, "Since she is a killer whale, let's call her Scotty." "Scotty?" Maginot and Alexander were both slightly startled. The latter recited the name silently several times and wondered, "It sounds like it's a girl's name." "Isn't a girl's name nice?" Kaylan laughed. "Besides, the goddess of victory is female. No one has ever heard of the male god of victory, right? Just call her Scotty. Sikd is our goddess of victory." "If you want to explain it like this, then I understand." Maginot nodded vigorously and gave Kaylan a thumbs up. "Good name, it is indeed a good name." While Maginot was busy flattering Kaylan, the Hound on the other side tugged on Leighton's sleeve and asked, "Scatty, do you know anyone with this name? Could it be Kaylan, Ian's old best friend, or his first love or something? Damn it, this guy couldn't have a woman outside behind Miss Soma's back, right? I've never heard of anyone with this name around Kaylan. If he is really a lover, then he has done a very good job of keeping it secret. No, when Kaylan was on the Ark, he basically stayed with us. Together, how can we have time to pick up girls?" Leighton scratched his head and said. "Maybe it's a netizen." Hound nodded and glanced at Sophia Soma standing not far away from the corner of his eye. "You two, stop guessing." At some point, Ze Logo had already walked behind Hound and Leighton. "The Scatty that Kaylan mentioned is actually a character in a game." "What? Game character?" The Hound turned his head and found that Sanwoo girl had changed her appearance at this time. She was wearing a dark blue combat uniform, her long white hair had been dragged to the ground, and she had a pair of clear and transparent red eyes. Although his face is still expressionless, but compared with his previous appearance, there is a hint of inexplicable coquettishness. Behind her, she was carrying a huge sword that was almost as tall as her. The blade of the giant sword was still stained with traces of what seemed to be mucus. "Is this, Scatty?" Hound was stunned. "Why did Kaylan give the battleship this name?" "Because the prototype of this game character is a killer whale," Ze Logo replied immediately. "Anthropomorphic killer whales? What kind of weird XP is this? I didn't expect that guy Kaylan to be so good at it." Hound said with a smile. In that game, Scatty's enemies were octopus-like Thulhu creatures lurking in the deep sea. From a certain perspective, the enemies she faced were very similar to us, and Scatty's this heavy sword once severely damaged the most powerful of those monsters. I think Kaylan chose this name because he hoped that this battleship could severely damage the monsters that occupied the Ark. Logo said. I almost forgot that you are also a senior Internet Addict player. Hound subconsciously stretched out his hand to pat Logo's head, but stopped halfway, coughed twice, and said seriously, how about just a heavy injury? Enough, when facing the enemy, we must crush it completely. P.S. Give your heart to Scatty.